5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Sync. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 239 of the TTV podcast. I'm Meso.
I'm Bar.
I'm Eljay.
I'm Jonathan.
I'm Ben.
I'm Phweffie.
I'm Takuma.
I'm Tenebrae Invictus.
I'm EXX Trooper.
And hello, everybody.
Yo, real talk there. I totally forgot I was the one doing the sync.
To be fair,
Heard you.
that's never made sense to me, to be honest. Because Meso leads this podcast, so...
arbitrary thing we do.
It's totally arbitrary. But, like...
Well, you see, it's like a band. You know, you gotta... Sometimes you got a trombone, and then you got a drum solo.
Right, exactly. Var's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then Meso's like the lead vocalist.
So which one of us is the sucker
Meso.
that got stuck with the trombone?
I'm like the other three members of Slipknot. The ones that no one really knows what they do. They're just kind of on stage.
Who's Slipknot?
Okay.
Suicide
You're
Squad
the
character.
triangle, or you're the page turner.
He's the man who can climb anything.
This is Katana.
He's a really important
This is
member.
Katana.
Her soul's drained. Her sword draws.
I would advise not getting killed by her.
Yay, Suicide
I would
Squad jokes.
advise
You
not
are
getting killed by her. Her sword sucks the souls from you.
Man, I
Yeah,
hope
son.
everyone
No
here
idea what you
sees
guys are
Suicide
talking
Squad.
about.
Anything.
Yeah,
It's
apparently
that
X
really
hasn't.
dumb movie that just came out. Suicide
X.
Squad.
You know, just that one movie called Suicide Squad, which everyone thought was going to be
Triggered.
good, and then DC once again failed us.
Once again.
Apparently
Apparently
they're
they're
trying
trying
to
to
I've got hopes for Wonder Woman, guys.
Forgot that line.
But hey,
Man,
Suicide Squad 2.
Do you really have hopes for Wonder Woman?
I've got hopes for Wonder Woman.
You know, the
I do.
trailer, I saw
I
the
don't.
trailer, and I'm like, it looks good. Then I remember Suicide Squad, and I'm like, I've been through this before. I've been betrayed before.
Yeah, I don't.
All right, live
I
CD
have
audience has already
major
ripped my
trailer-
dreams
But
here.
how are the
Preliminary
facial
reviews have already been
animations?
bad, apparently. Great. Dang it. I wanted Wonder Woman to be
I
good.
have,
I like
I
Gal
have
Gadot.
Wait,
major-
there have been reviews for it?
Now, Var,
Apparently.
remember what everyone was saying about Iron Fist?
That's true.
That
That's
is true.
There's a lot of bad reviews of Iron Fist, and I am pretty much
I actually
all the way through
haven't
that
Watched
show.
Iron Fist bar?
I've
You?
got two
I'm at
episodes
episode-
left. I'm enjoying the heck out of it.
I'm episode 11.
I don't care about it.
It's
I'm on,
actually pretty good.
episode 4 or 5.
Actually, I
I'm
finished
waiting
it
for
last
Jessica
night.
Jones season
Seen the
2. I
entire
don't
show.
care about anything
Oh,
else.
What did you
It's my-
think,
Still
Jay?
haven't
If
watched
you
anything
finished
past
the
the
entire
first
show,
episode.
what are your thoughts?
I thought it was good.
Yeah.
I thought I definitely think Finn Jones was right. And I think it stands along with the others.
Finn Jones is right about what? For maybe not everyone in our audience knows about it.
I think Finn Jones is right that it stands alongside the other Netflix Marvel
Yeah.
shows.
Okay.
I think so too, because it's definitely my least favorite of the ones I've seen so far. But at the same time, it's on the same level of quality for me. It's like right up there.
It would be like Thor and Captain America were at the end of the leading up to Avengers. You know.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
actually something that's a really good
Wait, what?
thing I'd like to mention. It's Iron Fist is Netflix's Thor.
Yeah,
I
What?
think that's a really good way of putting it.
That's fair, I guess. Although I liked Thor, so
I like Thor as well.
I
hated Thor when
like
I
Iron
first saw it.
Fist. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Thor 1 and 2 okay, but I am so stoked for Thor 3.
Dude,
Oh, Thor
Oh
3.
my gosh.
Ragnarok is gonna rock.
Speaking of rocks,
Short-haired Thor.
how about that?
What was that, Fluff?
conversation we were doing before? Huh? That was fun.
Short-haired Thor.
Who's saying what right now? What?
I can hear you silently judging me, and I don't care.
I can't judge something that I never heard.
I don't know. What am I supposed to... Am
Well,
I a
Takuma asked
judge?
me short-haired Thor, and I was like short-haired Thor, and then there was a
I didn't.
silence.
Wait, what?
Oh,
I
you
didn't
like
say
short
anything
head
about
Thor?
short
You
hair.
asked me.
I didn't
like
say
short-haired
anything
Thor.
about the hair.
I don't
I-
remember any of this.
You
Somebody
like
asked
normal,
me whether
normal
that's.
Chris Hemsworth?
I'm starting to question my sanity now.
Phweffie is talking to the
swear
the
it's
10th TTV member, the one that died 5 years ago.
The one that drowned in the lake.
Hey man,
Drowned
don't
in the
talk
lake.
about him. He was my friend.
You mean little Johnny?
Yeah, they tend to do.
You mean little Johnny?
Yeah, little Johnny.
Little Johnny,
Little John.
the
Wait,
10th
we
member,
really don't talk about Little Johnny.
died before BIONICLE came back.
Oh, rip.
Tragic.
That
You
was
just
his
wanted to
only
know where to
dream.
find the latest recap reviews. Now we can't find anything. because he's dead.
Can't find anything but
and the
cold
recap
hard
release ended.
ocean floor.
He was the original founder of eBay today.
Oh man.
Bless you.
Rip little Johnny.
Now he's gone.
So we
What?
kind of have a lot to talk about today.
We have a ton to talk
Just
about.
a little bit. Let me
We've got
give
so
you guys
much
a
stuff
Talk
to
primer.
about, which I don't
This
want.
episode might be extra long. We might have people like dropping in and out, depending. It's going to be a crazy episode, so brace yourselves. The live
Yeah.
studio audience who joins at patreon.com/TTV channel is going to be in for a treat today.
Definitely.
Man,
Let me
it's
give you
so
the rundown on what we're going to talk about. We've got several G3 polls that have been
Can I
posted
just,
over the
like,
last week. What? Go for it.
Explain real quick. I feel like they need an explanation. I feel like they deserve to know what's going on.
Sure.
Because throughout this whole podcast thing we've been doing,
Right.
We've had this like philosophy. Every time BIONICLE G3 gets mentioned off air, we're like, okay, don't talk about it. No more talking about it. We have to save it for the podcast. We can't talk about G3. It has to be in recording.
And we definitely do that.
And we definitely do that,
Except this week.
except for this week, in
We
which
didn't-
practically every
Yeah,
single
we,
day we were like, you know what? Just I can't wait until Saturday. Let's just talk about this real quick. It'll be fine. We won't get that
Yeah,
far
we,
ahead of anything. And then like 4 hours later, it's like, man, we really should have recorded that.
We had.
And that's how it's been
Yeah,
all week.
I'm so
So.
glad this wasn't a drinking game because we would all be dead.
You know, me, Var, Eljay, and
We would
Phweffie
all be
had
dead.
a night where we
Dude.
just talked about Bionicle. Like, literally, the entirety
Actually, it
of
all
was so late. It
night.
was actually morning for me.
That's true.
I had to leave to go to school. we started it at like 9 p.m. I think. We started that conversation
something like
9
that.
p.m. Up and all night, and by the time we got to the ending, I was like, "Well, I'll see you guys. Got to drive to school now."
Bear in mind, this is the conversation we had in call, not counting the entire text conversation we had in the chat, arguing all day
Which
about Bionicle.
Which, yeah, that was
Yeah.
that was probably an entire 24-hour period where I did nothing but think about Bionicle.
No, I know,
all 24
right?
hours.
I can't remember the last time that happened, but totally. I was thinking about Bionicle all day. I was freaking driving up to see my parents. I was like, yeah.
Do you know when I went to London? Do you know what I saw?
Was it Bionicle?
We were talking. We had that discussion, right? We had that discussion the day after. I'm driving. Do you know what I see? Westworld.
yeah,
As a
that's how. See, this is a
company.
podcast on its own, right there. We'll have to do like a separate
X-Files
podcast about this.
Can we
Did you
talk
see
about? Yeah, let's do
Southworld?
another podcast about Westworld as well.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Mess, I didn't mean to do it all that much.
No, it's
What were
fine.
you saying?
It's just what's happened in the last week. We've made a lot of strides in terms of plot,
North
character.
World.
What up, Eljay?
No, sorry. Talking about
We've made a lot of
Southworld,
strides in character design, artwork, plot, concepts, all sorts of polls we've had for the community to get feedback on certain things. Not all of which will be discussed today.
Unfortunately.
A few of those will be. Additionally, later on during the show, we're going to be spotlighting a fan project who pledged the $50 tier on Patreon, Project Afterman. So you can look forward to that later in the show. But for
Really
now,
cool stuff.
let us not waste any more time. We are going to delve straight into the G3 discussion and make some strides here. So,
Oh boy.
where do we want to start? What's
Alright.
best?
That's
How
a
about
good
with
one.
everything I've missed on the past 2 episodes? Go.
You can go listen to them.
There were several polls posted in the BrickFeed forum on or TTV boards.
Board.tvchannel.com. Register now.
Board.tvchannel.com.
Board.tv channel.
There, two of them are
It's .com.
Let him finish.
two of them kind of spawned out of each other. There was the it actually didn't start as a poll. It was started by one of our members who was questioning about the gender ratio in Bionicle and everything. That led to a very long-winded discussion about the validity of potentially changing a gender of a Toa, adding new characters, that kind of thing. So as it stands, there are 2 different polls on the boards that kind of emerged out of this one central topic. One poll is should the Toa's gender be changed? More female team members. This is a pitch poll. You can go over there, check out the option there, vote on that. It'd be pretty sweet. And then there's another poll that spawned out of that. It's called the should there be new Toa or new characters in BIONICLE G3? And that's kind of an ongoing discussion we've had for the past couple weeks as well. Mm-hmm. So of these 2, that's probably going to be the main topic of discussion for right now. I'm not sure which one you guys want to talk about more.
I kind of want to talk about the gender ratio topic more.
Yeah, they do kind of go hand in hand.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the gender ratio first, because I feel that's going to lead to more discussion. Because I feel like the other one, we kind of have a grasp on what we want that to be.
Yeah, I think we know what we want. Yeah.
Right, but let's kind of like talk about this. Should the Toa's gender be changed?
With the gender, we're curious as to there's only 2 Toa who are possible to get their genders swapped, Liwa and Pohatu. And it's like, do we want to do one, the other, neither, or both?
Basically,
everybody agrees we basically need to change somebody, because everybody, if we're keeping the original characters, because most everybody dislikes the 1 to 5 gender split.
I don't know, Meso. About 49% of the people who
Agreed.
voted in that gender poll thought that nothing should change.
Well, that is the majority who thinks that something should change, but I see your point. It's a slim margin, very close.
I do feel like...
I'm joking.
yeah, I was about to say, I'm not sure if that's actually...
yeah, no, I'm just screwing around. It's
fair.
What I've learned, personally, from these polls, is that change is scary, guys.
Change is scary.
Oh, I could have told you that before a poll.
It's like it's terrifying, honestly.
Change
You
happens
should
every
know.
If you get it
People
right,
need to get over
you're
it.
rewarded for it.
Yeah, when you go to the store and you pay with like a big dollar bill and like you get change,
Yes,
that
yes,
happens
yes,
every
yes.
day.
Yeah, like, come on.
Should we address stuff like changes? Should we address that right now, or like
I
Wanna do
think
that?
we'll get into that naturally.
Okay, all right.
I don't think we need to necessarily talk about that at the moment, because I think the gender stuff is important. I feel like everybody in the BIONICLE community, even the people that aren't for this potential change, can kind of realize and recognize that there is sort of this unbalanced gender ratio thing here, where Golly being the only female member always seemed like an odd thing. Mm-hmm. I feel like most people have noticed that. Whether they care about that or not is up for debate, right? That's the part that matters.
Yeah, because not everybody minds. But it is still weird how like the water species is always the only one that had to be female.
It's female.
Right.
And we're getting rid of that, I think.
Yeah.
But
I think everyone here in
Yeah.
TTV very much, I believe everyone, Takuma, I haven't heard your opinion on that, but I believe we've mostly come to a consensus that we would like at least one more female character.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand,
I
it'd
agree.
be kind of a... I don't want to go as far as saying shock, but it'd be different to have one of these characters we've known for over a decade to suddenly swap. But I do see that it probably should happen.
Right. There's merit to having another female character. I think
100%.
we can all see that.
Yeah.
So in that instance, we discussed back and forth about who we feel would be this character, right? There's 6 Toa to work with. One's already female. Don't have to worry about her. The other ones we've talked back and forth about. I believe someone even once mentioned Kopaka, of all people, being a female at one point.
Now you're just pandering to Lady Kopaka.
Yeah.
Now we definitely can't do it.
But I feel like we've kind of all reached the same conclusion that the 2 characters that have, I feel, the most open interpretation of their personalities that can be worked with a bit more and expanded upon is Liwa and Pohatu. And they're the ones who are a bit more flexible in regards to changing the gender. So those are the 2 people that we put up on the poll. I left it open for other people if they have different ideas of if potentially they see someone else as being a good candidate for this. I left that open in the poll as well. Not many people voted for that. In fact, a great 4% thought that someone other than those 2 or none could be potentially a female. So
Right.
I think most people tend to agree that if one has to change, it would either be Liwa or Pohatu.
And I was about to say that, like, I totally concede that any of the Toa could be female. It's not like a thing that's just regulated.
Yeah.
We looked at all the dynamics. I mean, like, if in terms of like recognizability and some other forms there, we talked about like we just threw out the idea of Tahu being changed into the girl, and we're like, just something about that just seems a little too drastic. If that made sense, like he's like he's the main, not the main character, but like he's the poster boy. And it's not so much that changing it would be a bad thing. It just felt a little
Off.
Yeah, I guess so. If that makes sense.
There's a fine line between making decent changes and just pandering.
Possibly. I mean, like
changing for the sake of change.
Well, I mean, I do think.
Well, I feel like a lot of people would probably argue that we are doing that with this discussion, right? We're changing things for the sake of change.
Right, exactly.
That is definitely an argument that I was fighting against during in the topic itself.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
Changing for the sake of
there's
change
also
would imply that we didn't really put much
reasonable
thought
change.
into these changes. Obviously, every change that we're making is for a reason. There's usually some sort of benefit to it. So I don't understand where all that's coming from.
I mean, I get it, and I feel like there's merit to it because I personally, for me, in my interpretation of it, I find that there's a lot of people who just simply don't like the idea of change in its entirety. So, like, whenever something new is being presented, it's a very knee-jerk reaction to reject that idea, right? That's my personal interpretation of a lot of this. However, I do feel like, in fairness to these people, a lot of this discussion has been happening behind the scenes outside of our podcast. So they might not necessarily understand our reasoning or all the thoughts that went into why we feel these decisions would be justified.
Fair enough.
And I feel like part of the thing too is that like a lot of people don't realize there have been people saying that, hey, G1 was really good. Why are you going to go in and change it? Why don't you just kind of like stick to what has worked before? There's two reasons for that. One, didn't really work before because BIONICLE's been canceled twice. So obviously something about it has not been
even when it was
connected.
still up, people took
Right.
issue with a lot of this.
I will say, that while that is an argument, that
that
isn't
is-
necessarily the reason BIONICLE did fail.
Right, like no one's
Yeah, I
saying
don't
like
think
BIONICLE
it-
got canceled because Lewa wasn't a
Yeah.
girl.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
We're not
Yeah.
trying to say that. We're trying to say that it wasn't perfect. That's why it's no longer it's not continuing in the same form, the same way that
Well,
other
I
franchises and
mean,
stuff have been. There's
Yeah,
a lot
we're
of
just looking at any factor that could be changed for the better. So that hopefully when if BIONICLE were to come back, that these changes would actually help in some sort of way. So maybe like even something as small as I think it's a small deal. Even as something as small as making Lewa a girl or Pohatu a girl could probably make a big difference later down the
Obviously,
line.
I'm going to have a lot to say on this topic because, well, quickly, I wanted to mention
your
on knee-jerk
interpretation of you in
reactions,
the BIONICLE world.
System BIONICLE? No.
Yeah.
But yeah.
There's a great comment from live studio audience member Mononui606. Why change an established character when you're already planning to introduce a new Toa of Lightning?
because 2-7 is just as bad as 5-1.
Yeah, the ratio doesn't necessarily change, you just kind of add on to it.
Plus, I'd say the actual reason is that Voriki won't be introduced in the first year.
Wait, Voriki?
Whoever we end up going with, yeah.
I think that's
really
another thing that
missed
we've talked about a bit further outside of the podcast. I think we're all pretty okay with bringing in Voriki as our seventh Toa
yeah.
3.
Oh my
Yeah,
god.
it's fairly evident that the actual seventh Toa it doesn't have to be Takanuba. We've already seen this in G2.
Yeah.
The seventh Toa can pretty much be
Anyone.
whoever.
The thing with the seventh Toa is that it's always an additive to the main core. It's
Right.
always been this sort of thing that is meant to expand the story after the fact, almost, where it's like
not
you've got
part of the core dynamic.
it's not part of the core, it's not part of the setup, it's not part of the initial payoff either. It's always, you've got your main characters, you've got your main villain, you've got your main story, and then once we've reached the conclusion to that, or we've gotten to a point where it's time to introduce new elements, that is when you bring in your seventh Toa. The seventh Toa has always been an additive new thing. It's not necessarily a core aspect of the start. And with that said, it makes the seventh Toa a bit more malleable. It makes that character a bit freer as far as what dynamics you can play with, how it looks, and the actual character that you're working with. It's not quite on the same level as our core 6. I mean,
Right.
obviously the pushback to people who don't want this change to happen kind of goes to show you how much care is being focused more towards the main 6 versus your 7th Toa.
Right.
So there is that freedom there. There is also the question of, well, if you really want to balance the gender ratio, then why not make the Toa of Lightning female? and
I'm also perfect.
be at that. And my response to that is, who's to say that we don't want to do that too?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it feels it's hard to decide because at the same time it matters, but it doesn't matter at the same time. Like, if you know what I mean, if you go out your way to change a gender of a character, you like, for example, I was thinking, well, maybe there needs to be more female characters to represent the audience that is female. At the same time, you think to yourself, why do you need a female character to represent like girls and women? And it just kind of, that's what I've been going through as I've been thinking about this, is like, it's so much of a big deal, but it's not at the same time. It shouldn't be a big deal, but it is.
It's interesting
Does
because
anyone else
you
want
do,
to
yeah,
talk?
you totally bring up a good point where, I mean, part of it has to deal with, like, when we say it doesn't matter, like, you know, like the gender or something doesn't matter, what we're saying is that, like, there shouldn't be any difference. There shouldn't be, like, a difference between how they're treated and, you know, the character, the gender shouldn't necessarily matter that much. But
You
that
shouldn't define them.
right, but at the same
least
time,
not
I
that
do
much.
think representation is very important. You know, and it's not to downplay that. I feel like, you know, having equal representation of, or not necessarily equal, but like a better representation of both genders is better than
Especially in this day and age, like a lot of people really do care about that.
Right, and I mean, like, obviously,
actually-
you don't make it a defining trait. You have to make good characters that just happen to be of a certain gender or of something. But
Good characters have to stand on their own merit.
the ratio's so imbalanced
Yeah,
in
and-
Bionicle specifically. That's why I feel like we
really
do have
is,
to
yeah.
change it. And that's a
It's
common
really
complaint
fitting.
I hear from a lot of girls in the fandom beforehand. You included, Phweffie, of how much, you know.
Yeah.
LJ, and you sounded like you want to say something real quick.
Yeah, it's actually really fitting that we discussed Iron Fist at the very beginning of this episode, because that has been a very heavy
exactly.
and thick controversy surrounding the show.
Totally.
For sure. There's a great comment in the live studio audience that by Scorpion Strike here. If you only have one female character, their gender by definition ends up defining them. It's the thing that is part of them that isn't part of the others.
That's
actually
that's
really
Ninjago.
excellent.
Very
the chick.
It's like,
Yeah,
you're not
like
talking
Mia,
about, it's
you're
the
the
hot
girl.
guy. Oh, it's the guy who's always goofing out. Oh, it's the girl.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
That's
the
actually
reason-
literally a trope. Like, we have some really nice fans made us a TV tropes page,
Awesome.
and, you know, kind of went down the list,
man.
you know,
I didn't
Var,
even
you're
see
this, Meso, you're that. Yeah, Phweffie, you're the girl. So,
yeah,
sorry.
it's a trope.
Yeah.
It's a trope on
that
the
exists.
5-man band,
It's-
right? There's a hero, the
Yep.
Lancer, the Bruiser, I think.
And the thing with, like,
and the chick.
thing about Voriki is because it doesn't work. Changing Voriki to female does not fix the problem, because I'm just going to spitball in here. I don't see Voriki being introduced until year 3.
or
By
year,
that point,
year
the
2 or
dynamics
3.
will have been
yeah.
set up, established, and honed in on. Adding her would be, it would be just additive at that point. It's just numbers. She's like Takanuva. She adds on to the dynamic, but that's a lot different than having one of the characters be female from word go to establish those dynamics, establish that core cast. Basically, Voriki would help, but Voriki is not a substitute.
For those of you in the audience saying, isn't that the TTV ratio? Yeah, we're trying to fix that as best we can. So if you have an audition you
Yeah.
want to, throw in, feel free to send it in.
it was never a
Email
thing
us, do
where we
something.
actively went, hey, we're a Bionicle podcast.
Yeah, but we
and
have to have the
offset.
Very
token
different
girl.
songs.
Phweffie.
We
It
didn't-
just
we
so
didn't- we didn't
happened
meet
that
our-
the majority of
We
us are
didn't,
dudes.
we didn't freaking meet our female cast member quota or anything. We were like,
Yeah.
no, that's about
It's not
it.
like,
You know.
before this podcast, we never went, okay, Purple, don't show up today. Phweffie,
Exactly,
only you're
right.
allowed. How it
Yeah, we
works,
gotta
like,
swap you out.
Purple's
One,
asleep.
one female.
It's honestly just the amount of additions we've gotten in. Most of them happen to be male. I feel like representation in our cast would be really important. That's just who.
If you are a very
'cause it's a very-
charismatic, entertaining lady who would like to be on a podcast about Lego, go ahead and, we have a lot of people don't know this, but we actually do have job signups
We
at
do.
the bottom
Yeah.
of our
We do.
front
Yeah,
page.
they are on the
There's no
bottom of our front page.
guarantee, but if you ever feel like you want to try for something, we will review it. It's like,
Right.
Go ahead,
Send
put in
email,
your
Sometimes it
put in a
works,
jobs
though,
thing,
just saying.
link your reel. That kind of deal.
Sometimes it does work. In X's case, it did work.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah? Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
and purples too.
Yeah.
So I do feel like, judging from the reception in the live studio audience, there's also another misconception that by adding more to this to the female ratio here and trying to balance this out, they're taking the definition of balance very literally, in the sense that what we're looking for is there to be equal representation between both genders in its entirety.
Yes.
And I guess the way to establish that would be having equal male characters with female characters, and I don't think that's necessarily the point. It's kind of missing the point a little bit. The point is to have more variety in these female characters that have more to them other than just the girl part.
No.
They're not
And
categorized.
we don't want to do
That
like
being
diversity
said,
just for
Brian.
diversity's sake either. We do think that will like
We don't want to shoehorn.
yeah, like you do think that's an integral part. Like someone's, the character's gender will be an integral part of their character, but it won't be the only defining thing. It's
Again,
really
you-
when it comes down to it, it's just a common complaint with Bionicle that I feel like we all have.
Well, see, I feel like the phrase doing diversity for diversity's sake comes with like a bit of a
Baggage.
misnomer of
Yeah.
what it means.
Right.
Because, like, to me, I don't necessarily see what is wrong with doing things for diversity's sake. Because diversity is variety, right? It's changing things so that there's a mixture of elements, things that'll that keep you, interested, compelled.
When I
Right?
mean by,
Yeah.
what I mean by that,
Diversity-
and I feel like what most people mean by that, it's when diversity, or it feels like it, instead of servicing the story, it comes against the story, where it's
Right.
like a thing, like I don't want to have any, and they do this in Ninjago stuff too. I don't necessarily want to have any storylines where like everyone's like, well, you can't do this because you're a girl, and then suddenly she's like, I can do this because
I have zero interest
hear me
in
roar,
doing
that
any
kind
of
of thing,
that
where it's
stuff.
like, oh, I've seen that story like a billion times. Obviously,
Well,
it's like
I mean, firstly, we don't have to do something like that. I
exactly.
know
That's
you
what.
mean.
That's what I'm
Like, when
saying.
people-
That's what the diversity.
don't
So
have
diversity.
to
So
have
in a,
Right.
in a case where it'd be
character
pandering.
who
It will be,
against
when it
another
feels like pandering, where it
party.
feels like the only reason that diversity is included then is to point towards that and be like, what a diverse cast we have. Look at look at these girls doing things that girls shouldn't be able to do. Therefore, it's like I feel like that's what people dislike, is when it does not service the story and instead detracts from the story in a sense.
Stereotype. That's a stereotype. Like having, because there's been this whole wave of strong female characters to the point where it's become a stereotype of oh, you're a girl, you can't do this. I think we shouldn't mention it at all. Like it
I
should
think
just
so
be
too.
normal to have
Yeah,
a girl on
I don't
the team.
think so either.
It shouldn't be mentioned. It shouldn't
Right.
say, oh, you can't do this because you're a girl, or are you going to be okay? Like, no, just treat them as anybody else.
That's one of
Like,
the
if they get knocked down, you pick them up like anybody else, and
I
that's how
agree,
you
token
fix
girl.
things like that. By saying they're a girl and paying attention to them, way too much attention to them. That is how that stereotype.
Preach it for.
Mate.
It's
Right.
there we
Tell
go.
I cannot stand it when things do that too much.
I'd give you a standing ovation if I wanted to.
if I had legs.
Standing ovation.
If I had one.
Alright, does anyone else want to speak?
All right, we're getting.
I feel like that was a very good summary of that.
That was good.
So
Now, I feel like we really need to get into like the nitty gritty of this.
The meat and potatoes
The
of this
nitty
discussion.
gritty.
We haven't already been there?
No,
Well,
this is
because
the primer.
we basically,
this is the explanation for what
yeah.
we're about to discuss.
exactly.
Right. So I mean,
I think the majority's on board with Levi. I'll just cut to the
yeah.
chase.
Let's cut
Yeah.
to the chase of that.
100 times Lewa, 0 times Pahatu.
So I do. Let's see, there's one made to the center, of course, and I want to hear your opinion. I want you to kind of get that out.
Yes. Okay, so it's evident that I'm in favor of a male Liwa and a female Pohatu. That should be obvious to anyone. And I'm gonna come out and say it's for very
Shiwa.
very selfish reasons. There's the arguments for female Liwa are all completely sound. They logically make sense. They would work perfectly fine. But I, being human, am selfish, and I want to be Liwa.
So
If we
I was
have
about to
a-
say it's an identification thing, right? You identify
Why,
as
why
a-
can't you be? Why can't you want to be a girl?
Yeah,
Is
there's
there
something wrong with that?
okay.
It's not a matter of that. It's a matter of my vocal range.
Well,
No matter how many times.
I don't know. I think I think you can still pull it off.
no matter how many times I have
Just
been
suck some
told,
helium.
thank you very much, ma'am, while I talk on the phone, I still am never going to be able to properly convey on my own a female Liwa. So, that being said, I've done
Sure
my
you
best
can
to
with a bit of
argue
helium.
logically for why a male Liwa would work and a female Pohatu would work very well.
Basically, your argument is summarized as in, I want to voice act Liwa one day. If Liwa's a girl, I'm out of a job.
Yeah, exactly. That is my entire...
Just run
Right.
that
feel
G1
you. Which
is funny
Adding-
because
I
there
feel
are
your
definitely
pain.
women out there who voice male characters. I mean, Lloyd from Ninjago.
Yeah,
case in
exactly.
Point.
We
But
did have
Dudes
another
Dudes
idea.
voicing female characters, not much of a thing.
Because very
We
different
did
voice
have
range.
another idea sort of unfold the other day where, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get
know what I
there.
mean?
We'll get
You
there.
know
We'll
what I
get
mean?
there. We'll get
Yeah.
there. We'll get there.
There's a solution there.
Will we get
Yeah.
there?
We will get there, hopefully.
There
no,
might be a
so,
solution.
I think I know what you're going with then. So
I know
Yeah,
exactly
yeah,
what
know
you're
what I'm
going for.
saying.
Yeah,
I know what
I
you're
know
saying.
exactly what you're talking
Are
about.
you
Me too,
thinking
I
what
know
I'm
what you
thinking?
I'm thinking what you thinking, bruh.
Guys.
Oh, you guys so cryptic.
I'm a
So
little tired to
cryptic, much
understand
wow.
this. But yeah, so as far as this discussion goes, the basis for my logical argument, which validates my selfish desires, is that two things. One, I like patterns. I like juxtaposition. I really like parallels. And in this instance, there's been some debate as to whether we would have Toa Kaita, and I don't know if we're actually going to get into this today, but Toa Kaita are comprised of two different groups: Pohatu, Tahu, and Onua, and Liwa, Gali, Kopaka. And those two groups, they form Werua and Akame. Well, I like, personally, the parallel that these groups are still kind of centered. So you have a female Pohatu, you have the two females, form up those groups of three. I like that kind of parallel.
I
See,
feel
Additionally,
My counter to that is then the female's still the minority in both cases.
I feel like
That's
it
just a
ties
matter
into
of
the thing of
facilitation.
like there's in this parallel you still have the girl. You have like Tahu and you
Right.
have the girl sidekick, and then you have Kopaka and you have the girl sidekick, and then you have it too, and it's like
Right. Part of the problem with that is it comes down to the same reason why I feel like, because before we also said, like, the idea of making them both female was thrown out, right? Like Pohatu and Liwa being female was thrown out, and part of the argument against that was that at that point it makes it almost like an even split, so it feels like the ratio is just too artificial.
It feels
right?
forced.
It feels fabricated.
Right.
It feels like that's not a natural way for those characters to
Right.
group up. And I feel like the same argument can kind of be said here.
yeah, and that's, yeah, of course. And again, that's a very logical conclusion to come to. That does make a lot of sense. I'm just, like I said, I'm a fan of patterns.
Well,
like
I mean,
that.
it also systematically ties into the thing where it's like, you know, if you're starting to pair, like, you know, if you have different parallels and they're paired male and female, that ties into this thing about romance, right? And what is our stance on romance in G3 and like all that implications already kind of like there because you're already pairing couples, quote unquote. You know, at that point, if you have, you know, if you wanting to establish this parallel between Tahu and Gali and Kopaka and Pohatu, female Pohatu, that you're kind of, you know, paving the way for that dynamic. And I don't know if that's the dynamic that you would want to lead towards, or like kind of if you want to pair people based on that criteria, essentially.
Yeah. Now, moving quickly into my stronger of the 2 points.
Go for
From
it.
a design perspective, I feel that Liwa and Pohatu are stronger if they have, and again, this comes in the whole juxtaposition, if they are switched. Because, you know, the immediate thought would be, yeah, okay, that makes sense. How would we design the characters? How would we design a male versus a female minifigure? Because there does have to be a very visual difference between them. That's been a staple of LEGO minifigures. That's how the two are differentiated. Usually the male character torso design fills up the entire minifigure piece, and the female minifigure is a bit slimmer. It has kind of black bars on the side, to indicate a very particular form.
Yeah.
Now, in this instance, you would have presumably Gali and Liwa. Both elements, air and water, are very similar. They're very flowy, they're very wavy, and to an extent you'd want the designs to kind of match that.
All that wavy air.
You know what I mean. But I like the concept of the reverse being the case, of Liwa kind of having that full design, kind of having a little bit more of a bulky look, and Pohatu instead having the slimmer design.
Agreed,
like
TBH. But I mean, like, I'm for both in a sense. But like, I do from a visual standpoint, I prefer how I would imagine Pohatu for the similar reasons how I liked to have G2 made like Korga, the female, instead of like Kivoda or Vizuna, which everybody would have like maybe expected them to go.
It's
with.
a subversion of
version of
expectation.
expectation, which I'm always a fan of. There are points where that feels contrived too. I don't think this would reach it, but you basically, you gotta be careful in all things.
That's part of the thing when making changes. I do. I've come I've really come around to the idea, because we tossed out both ideas, with the idea of both a female Liwa and a female Pohatu. And initially, I will admit, I was like kind of against the idea of a female Pohatu, because I like the dynamic that the kind of bromance that Kopaka and Pohatu have. But I don't know. I was thinking about it, especially over the weekend, and kind of like, how that would change the writing and how that would change the dynamic. Really, it's not too much. So I'm not necessarily vehemently against Pohatu. I just think Liwa works better from like aesthetically, in terms of design, and in terms of like how the overall dynamic would work between them. I feel like the thing about Gali and Pohatu is that they are kind of very, as of right now, necessarily their personalities they'd serve the same purpose and the group. And I feel like if we make Liwa serves a very different purpose in the dynamic of the Toa. Liwa's kind of like the rookie, kind of a bit more carefree, a bit more,
Right.
And that personality juxtaposed to what we would have Gali be, I feel, is a better distinction between them, as opposed to both Gali and Pohatu being at some level they would be peacekeepers. At some level they would be, especially in G1, G2, not so much G2, but they're peacekeepers, they're friendly, they were like kind of this glue holding the thing together. I've always kind of envisioned even though Gali's a peacemaker, Pohatu's kind of like the Hawkeye in a sense of the group, like in Age of Ultron where he's doing that. So I don't know, that's my thing.
I've been playing a lot of Mass Effect recently. I just got finished playing Mass Effect 2 yesterday. And if we were to make like Pohatu a female, this is how I would kind of like imagine the dynamics going. I think most everybody here has played Mass Effect. Gali would be like Samara, and Pohatu would be like Kasumi.
I feel like Gali is a bit more a bit too playful
Samara
to be
is not
Samara.
unfriendly. She's not like an ice queen, but she's also very reserved. She's very formal. But she is kind of this maternal figure. She's nice to everybody. She cares for people. Kasumi is more lighthearted, cracking jokes, and friendly with everybody.
Yeah, but Kasumi's harder because like she doesn't have as many interactions I'd like, because she's a DLC character, Yeah. So it's harder for me to get that thing down.
I can kind of see that. I just don't feel like it necessarily enhances the dynamic that much. I know there was a discussion outside of the podcast about how the dynamics of the actual Toa and how they relate with one another too, as well as in particular in terms of Pohatu, his relationship with Kopaka being described as this sort of bromance type thing. I've seen this in the comments of the topic as well. A lot of people sort of feel that way towards Kopaka and Pohatu having this bromance that would be changed if Pohatu's gender was changed, right? I don't necessarily think so.
Nor do I.
I personally find that if I don't really understand how
I was gonna
the relationship or that dynamic is necessarily altered or changed in a negative way if Pohatu's gender was changed. However, at the same time, I don't think it is enhanced either.
Mm-hmm.
And that's I think the one thing that kind of prevents me from really wanting Pohatu to be the female in this instance. I don't think the dynamic is enhanced. I do feel like making Liwa's character female does give that character a bit more uniqueness and variety as far as the interactions. I also see a bit more of an enhancement between this potential Liwa's relationship with Anua, for instance, who I've always seen as this sort of mentor guider kind of character between the two, and I feel like that dynamic can be built up upon with this change as well. So I do feel like there is a bit more to play with, and a bit more enhancement going on with Liwa than I would say Pohatu as far as dynamics involved. And the discussion about Pohatu being too similar to Gali, I think, is also a good point towards Liwa.
Yeah, I mean, like,
I feel at this point it's a little bit too early to say, because we don't have defined outline.
Right, but we can't
characters.
until we have until we have.
that's
the
what
base
we're
of our
trying to
characters
form,
down.
right? And
Right.
I actually like. I argued. I actually was on the opposite side of the fence. Where I was arguing with you this one. What was it, Tuesday, Wednesday,
Right.
ish.
You were.
Yeah, I was arguing for the Romans, and over like this past couple days, I've been thinking about it. I think you really had you're mostly right in that aspect. Like it doesn't matter necessarily which gender. You can still have kind of that same relationship in that sense. But that being said, it doesn't really enhance or detract from that same relationship. Like making Pohatu a female wouldn't do it. The only, like, I guess, like, there's no real draw to changing that. There's no benefit in changing that in terms of changing the dynamic. Whereas Liwa, I feel like it probably would.
Yeah.
That, and I mean, like, unless, again, we're kind of skirting around this whole the idea of romance, which I know is a very controversial thing in the community.
Romance is a whole other conversation.
I don't know. I feel romance does tie into this conversation.
No. I don't necessarily think it doesn't tie in. I'm just saying that's a whole other thing that we're about to get
It's
into.
probably going to be either the next half of this podcast or another one entirely. Fair.
It's a big can of worms.
It's a big can of worms.
To that extent, regarding the Anua and Liwa comparison, I always really liked, personally, and I feel like we're going to be saying this a lot in Generation 1.
What interactions they have in Generation 2? Let's be real. Let's be real.
Yeah.
You could
Generation
switch
1's the
out
only thing
any
you
of the
can draw
Toa
from, so
for
that's fair.
anything in Generation 2, and it would work.
Yeah.
Of course, they didn't have too much of an interaction in Gen 2, but in Generation
Still
1,
bought the sets.
yeah, I did like that dichotomy of the older and younger brother. And because, Anua was always kind of considered, and this was originally how it was planned until they made them kind of the same age. Anua was the older, much wiser, and Liwa was the much younger, more rambunctious, and less experienced of the Toa. And you kind of had that older brother mentor trying to bring up his younger brother. And I liked that dynamic. If the Toa are to be seen kind of with a family dynamic, then I really like that. I think, honestly, a lot of people could relate to that to a significant extent.
Mm-hmm.
To that same time, I also believe that people can relate to a Kopaka being an older, kind of colder sibling, an older brother to a younger sister with Pohatu. And Pohatu's trying to constantly say, hey, come on, let's work together, let's be good, try and, excuse this, warm Kopaka up to things.
Right, but I feel like the relationship there is more of our younger, more lighthearted character
so
trying
it's,
to break the older, colder character out of his shell almost, right? That's that dichotomy there. Whereas with Anua versus Leo, it's more of I see more of like an older sibling, younger sibling, more of a loving relationship almost, where they're kind of they balance each other out, they work towards building each other up, and like they have a very friendly relationship with one another.
And there's not to say that Kopaka and Liwa can't have that same dynamic you're talking about too.
Well, I suggested that as a possible dynamic, although, of course, in this instance, the genders are still the way I would have preferred them.
Well,
Liwa's male, Pohatu's female. And I even suggested, because right now our dynamics, our romances, are so on and so forth, it is very rooted in Generation 1, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that being said, if we're making these changes, there's nothing to suggest that dynamics would change, or wouldn't change.
Right. Agreed.
And I had even suggested what you just said, Kahi, a Liwa Kopaka dynamic. Now, how does that change things? My idea was that Liwa would constantly be searching for Kopaka's approval. Kopaka would, in this instance, be the older brother, and he'd be cold and calculating and very, off-putting to Liwa. Now, How
What's
would
he
that work for
calculating?
Pohatu? Where does that put him? Because he's not Kopaka anymore. Well, would that put him with a new one?
Right.
With
The problem with that is that it opens up more problems, right? It doesn't necessarily change. It does fix the idea of keeping Liwa male, I guess, but it doesn't. It also causes more displacement as to where we need to put this other character and how do we change that character and his reactions with all the others.
Right.
To justify
But at the same time, that's challenging, and that is kind of an interesting concept. To me, at least.
Perhaps. But I think it's more of a challenge that we don't necessarily need to focus on at the moment.
Right.
Possibly.
Anyway. I think we're pretty much on the same page in regards to that. But the thing that we didn't really touch upon, but we did mention, was the romance aspect, because I did notice some people in the topic, for instance, a lot of people talking about how the Pohatu and Kopaka's relationship, for instance, how bromance was better than romance, and I saw that and I was like, because like as much as I think romance is an important aspect to characters, and it's obviously a normal thing that normal people experience, I don't necessarily think that just because you have these two characters who are opposite genders interacting with each other means that they're going to form a romance.
Spoiler, it won't.
Thank
No,
you.
totally.
Thank
Doesn't
you.
necessarily have to happen.
Don't you agree with that, Kahi?
Thank you. I mean, like, if you guys watch Ruby, like, Nora and Ren is, like, the first instance where I've seen that properly work out. And I've got one more episode left to watch, so if I'm proven wrong in that last one, I'm going to be very upset.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
Spoilers!
I feel like there's the same. Watch it.
I feel like there's a lot of people out there who are seeing this change as like, it's going to change the dynamic because all of a sudden there's going to be sexual tension between these two characters, and they're going to have to hook up, and they're going to flirt with each other, and they're going to build this like this romance relationship.
Before
and
say
it's just
something
like
you regret.
It's just like, well, I mean, no, that doesn't. I mean, just because they're different genders doesn't suddenly mean that this relationship is going to like take a completely different turn. You know, their characters are still their characters. Their personalities are still their personalities.
This took a weird turn.
All right.
Yeah,
You know what
I don't.
liked? Pacific Rim,
I've never
where
seen
they had that
Pacific
whole
Rim.
will they,
Yeah,
won't they,
yeah.
and they didn't.
Yeah.
Right. No.
Yeah.
It's good.
I can
And that's
kind
fine.
of yeah. I mean, like part of it is like the
I should see that movie.
when it comes to interactions
Wait, what?
necessarily, and this is just like partially it's because how we're wired as people, and part of it is how the fandom will take certain things. It is when it comes to interactions between like with guys and girls and and a guy and a girl character, it's easier for people to read into the guy and girl interaction way more. I think that's what people are kind of like they're talking about. They're kind of like talking about this entire thing about like and that's just, I mean, essentially it's how the culture's kind of hardwired us, because we see certain things in some way and we see certain things other way. There's definitely more of a thing as an audience if they're watching this guy and the girl, they have a close relationship and they're doing this back and forth thing and whatever. There's more of a tendency for people to ship those two characters together, or to like to draw that romantic thing together.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen it here in the podcast where like some fans will be like, oh, they'll pair people up just because they happen to talk a little bit.
I was
and
thinking
we're like,
more of
well, all right.
Overwatch. Because that's this one thing that's proved me, like, that all you need is like a male and a female character. They don't need to speak, or male, female,
We're interacting with each other, but people will still
you
ship
just
this.
need two people
Okay.
to work on a team or against
not even
each
that.
other, and
Are you
then that's
trying
it.
to-
Yeah, I was gonna
That's
say, it
it.
doesn't even
That's
have to-
all
It doesn't-
It doesn't even need to be opposite
Let's be
genders.
real.
Yeah,
If
it doesn't need
Overwatch,
to be
it's more
opposite.
likely the opposite.
Yeah.
Pharmacy
Are
and
you
like,
telling
you
me?
know, there's nothing
Are
wrong with
you
that.
telling me that my Bastion and May OTP is not real?
Bastion
How
and
dare
May.
you?
well, I mean, they're both the worst characters in the game.
Yeah, they're
so
both the devil. So
So, with this change, I think outside of the podcast, we all kind of reached a conclusion here, except for maybe one, that we're all pretty much on board with the idea that our Toa are not going to be romancing each other.
Correct.
As far as they are concerned, these all 6 of these people, they are siblings. They're a
At
family.
the very least, not within the group.
Not within
Yes.
the group.
Correct.
Yeah.
Outside of that, who knows?
And
Maybe.
Outside of that, romance exists in this world. Love exists in this world. Our Toa are not going to be participating in that.
At least
also
with each
something,
other.
At least with each other.
Something I would have thought about, like, which we haven't actually mentioned, is wouldn't it affect the team, like, if 2 people were romance to each other? Like, it would
Yes,
affect
it
the
would.
team dynamic, like, dramatically. So, unless you
would.
want drama...
Well, yeah, I think that's,
I don't
I mean,
know.
that's part
Fire guys, skepticism.
Yeah.
Listen, alright,
yes.
Yeah,
If you're romance to someone and they're in trouble,
Kahi's the
you're more likely to go
dissenting
to
opinion
them.
here.
Kai, speak your mind.
no, I mean, listen. All right, so we, Eljay got to speak his mind about the Lewa thing.
Got to get him started.
Listen, I gave.
I'm sorry,
Eljay
just
a
go.
chance.
No, just go.
Okay, all right.
You said you wanted a long podcast, here we go.
Yeah, here we go. I think that I'm not pushing for romance between the main cast, but I'm saying that we shouldn't limit ourselves because the what they're saying is that 0 romance. We're gonna make it a rule. There's gonna be no romance between the characters, and I'm like, well, let's wait and see how the characters interact and see how before we make this rule.
So this is why I proposed the
Okay,
other
there
day.
is-
Let's at least agree that there will be no romance between the Toa in the first year.
Totally agree.
See,
Because I don't want to go
Okay,
into this being
I
like
can
at the end of
move
this,
past that.
Tahu and Gali will be together or something. I don't want to.
see,
I don't want
I'm-
to work towards
I'm
that at
not
all.
willing. I'm not willing to even give you that inch because the mile is what you're going to request next, and my opinion, my stance on this will not change.
Okay.
I will never
I
at
like
any
the,
point wake up and go, you know what? I think I really want 1 or 2 of the Toa in the team to have a romance. Yeah, I won't.
I like the
suddenly do
suggestion that
You're not gonna
someone in
wear
the
me
live
down.
studio audience gave us out of New 6 of 6. Let's cap the romance for the at least for the 3-year pitch. I think that's fair.
Yeah,
I will
think...
kind of to go
Was it-
off of what. Go ahead.
No, my thing again has not been like I don't want a romance between these 2 characters in terms of like we need one. I'm not saying we need one at all. I'm saying that like romance is an important part of character development. Right? I mean, if you've looked at yourself, you've been in the relationship, you know how much that's changed you. Romance has changed. Is a possible evolution of a relationship between 2 characters. And so I don't subscribe to this idea that romance is inherently bad in a TV show. Romance is always wrong, or like romance is always going to be written badly. I don't subscribe to that idea at all. I don't think that it will always detract from characters. It's been done wrong before.
Right.
I just don't think that like that's a general blanket statement.
You're not pushing for a romance. You just don't want to close the door on it,
Right. And the same way that
if our characters are in the story naturally progress to a point where they could begin a romance, you don't want to necessarily reject that or stop that from happening just because we say so.
Right. And the same way that like I wouldn't like it's the same thing of the gender ratio where it's like at the very beginning BIONICLE they locked themselves, girls can only be in this tribe. And then later on, you can see they really try to get away from that with the Avatar in 2008, and then like in the Gory, they kind of like dropped out entirely. In G2, they dropped out entirely. That was a restriction they placed on themselves that didn't serve the story, and it was kind of a limiting thing.
Well,
I do apologize.
Okay.
I really need to get this out of my system. I'm going through the stages of grief right now since I'm fairly certainly decided on Leela being a female character. I'm at bargaining now. Listen,
Pretty much.
listen, buddy. I'll agree to leaving the door open if we can make Leela a guy so I can voice him. Okay? I'm bargaining right now. Come on, man, work with me.
Eljay wants to voice Lewa like romancing one of the other members or something.
It's basically
By the
the
way,
thing for
my
me, like
thing
the
is-
reason
Eljay wants
why
to play
like
a
leaving
shipping
the
role.
door
my,
open.
my serious comment on what you've had to say.
Okay, I do want to point out that if you were to keep Lewa as the male and retain the gender ratio and then allow romance, that is just an even bigger can of worms.
Yeah.
Are you sure you want to voice that?
That's even worse. That's even
But-
worse.
I don't want to keep the. I don't want to keep the ratio. I don't like.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just joking.
The reason-
My serious response to that though, Kahi, is that the characters don't do anything unless we make them. Like, we have to, as
I disagree.
I 100% disagree with
Listen,
you.
all right.
Marionette
Because
puppets.
the characters
I've been
are
trying-
They
not
got
live.
I
strings
just-
and they're not
The
free.
characters are not doing anything unless
Listen,
you
I've
ask
been
them.
trying to say this for like 5
Go
minutes
on.
now.
Go to
And Phweffie may even be able to attest to this as well. In my opinion, as not a professional writer, but as a writer, if you write a character well enough, or if you've got a character sort of thought out well enough, they will take on a life of their own.
Exactly.
They
Right.
will
Like-
lose
I
their control.
agree.
As I
100%.
am writing,
Yes.
I am not deciding what this character is doing. I am just showing everyone how they are
Okay,
reacting to the situations around them.
Yeah.
There's a-
Yes.
And I can think of a very specific example in a book that I'm writing where I thought this character out. I totally thought she was going to be doing one thing. And I had this moment of clarity where I really knew that I'd finally nailed this character and it'd come alive when I thought, oh snap, at the end of this all, she is going to do this. And I cannot logically stop that from happening.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Because she has taken on her
It just
own
makes
life.
the most logical sense.
So
For that character.
For that
tying it
character,
back,
yeah.
I do not want romance within the main cast, but I will not say 100% no simply because that might happen.
Exactly.
They will
That's-
make up their own mind.
that's what
I
I'm
will
saying.
not make up their
I-
mind.
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about, and it's called gardening. And there's two different ways of writing. There's
I'm
the
agreeing with them.
there's planning.
Oh, snap.
There's planning what you're gonna write, and then there's going. This is what George R. R. Martin does, because this is where I got it from. George R. R. Martin, same as Greg, they plant seeds, so they have an idea for a character, but instead of my mom's saying goodbye. Instead of saying
Bye, Mom.
Bye, mom.
Bye, Mom.
Bye, mom.
Bye.
Bye,
It's not mom, it's mum.
Yeah, sorry,
British.
mom.
Anyways,
Mum's the word.
there's two different types of writing. There's scheduled writing and there's seeding or gardening. And you basically you put an idea and you see how it turns out. And that is one of the most. That's one of the. It can be unpredictable. Sometimes things won't turn out the way you wanted to, but it will be the most organic way of writing a character. Having a character who's completely static and structured doesn't always bring them to life the way you want them to. Sometimes characters can come across as stale, static, and not relatable at all if you stick to it too closely. So I do agree with Takuma as well, and I agree we shouldn't shut the door on romance and many other different story plots because of that. Because if you're going in a certain direction, you want to keep it like that. You don't want to suddenly stop, because that frustrates people who are reading the story and take it in a different...
So-
Think of Mass Effect 3, for example.
I
That
was
is
gonna
one
go
of
with
the
a different
worst
analogy.
writing I've seen, because they stop it in its tracks and they force it in a different direction. Obviously,
Like,
not
imagine if. Sorry, go ahead.
in. I was just gonna say that's an extreme case of it, but go ahead. I let you talk.
Like, imagine if it's almost
We're
dinner
so
time,
far
right?
Kids' toy line, right?
And
Food.
all day, and you smell the pizza in the oven. And,
I like pizza.
yeah, pizza. And then you go to get it, but it's not pizza for dinner, it's fried chicken. Okay? Fried chicken isn't necessarily
eat it.
bad, but the whole time, everything's been building up to pizza. It's a shocking change.
Well,
that-
I
would
agree with everything that has been said about leaving the door open and not forcing things to change, keeping the possibilities open because characters can take on a life of themselves. There's one reason why I don't think that applies for romance between the main characters. And why I don't think we should leave the door open. It's about
Right.
how that dynamic is initially perceived. I want them to be siblings. And I'm not interested in sibling romance.
well,
Well,
okay,
an
whoa,
organic
hold up.
Yeah,
path of, hey, they don't
Meso, the
romance
guy
each
from the
other.
south,
But
is
I'm
not
not
interested
in that.
love.
I mean,
part of the natural progression, right, is it stems from forming their characters and their bonds and the way they think, their morals, that kind of thing, right? But like part of that in that initial brainstorming of how their personalities work is whether they see each other as siblings, surely, right?
That is the inherent
but, okay,
beginning.
let's talk about this.
It's-
All right, you get,
Yeah,
I,
so like,
like
in
this
the
brought up a
beginning,
lot.
if you're developing these characters to view each other as siblings, then naturally they're probably not going to progress towards a romance.
Like Phweffie was saying, you plant a seed, okay, and yeah, how it grows exactly can change, but if you plant a pumpkin seed, you're not going to wind up with a pizza.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what I'm
How do
saying,
you know?
okay, here's what I'm getting at though. So
I just really
people,
want pizza.
I've heard this argument come up a lot when we talked about this previously, that they're siblings of each other's siblings. What are you suggesting? We'll just get this out of the way. They're not actual siblings, right? You're not saying they're all raised by the same mom and dad. They all live in the Toa house. You know, like, are you guys actually advocating for that specifically, or they're just people that happen to meet each other?
Well, I mean, it could
Biology
just be
has nothing to do
biologically
with it.
they're related. Like, they didn't have to be upbrought, because the Toa before, like, they don't grow from Toa babies. They're just built as
Come
Toa.
Let's-
Right.
Unless
But, like,
you want
I
that
think-
to be
Toa
part of the
babies.
story.
I think the Lego Batman movie.
like,
Right, so
they're
what I'm saying is that,
clones,
like-
basically, like, think of it as kind of more of a cloning type deal, where they've used
What
similar
I'm saying is-
genetics and they've just created them.
Okay, the thing that makes you see someone as a sibling, so like I think it's called like the Westermark effect or the Westmark effect. I'm actually forgetting exactly the correct name of it, but essentially it's a thing where like when you're raised with someone, no matter if you're right, Meso, this doesn't necessarily depend on genetics. It's like if you're raised with someone, if you're adopted and you're raised with him, or if you just even have like a really close friend that
You're
you
not
spend a lot of
attracted
time
to
with as a kid. As you grow up, you're not attracted to them. That's what forms that effect. Now the difference is though, if you have a lot of people, you have people who are already kind of past a certain age into teenage, post-pubescent. You can totally have them come together and see each other as family. That's not within the realm of possibility. But them going into romance is not as is not as unrealistic. Like, I mean, like, have you never had a group of friends and then within that group, two of them started dating? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's like,
I've never had that.
I don't
I
have
have
enough
that.
friends for that dynamic to happen.
okay,
I have had
Yeah,
that.
I
Yeah,
know what you mean, yeah.
right. So
I
now
have had
the
a
thing is
friend
that like
dynamic where that hasn't happened.
now they might see each other as siblings, but because they're not actually siblings, that can actually change as it goes on. That is something that happens in real life all the time.
Right.
You know, so that's why I
For the
don't
sake
feel like
of this argument-
this thing is a solid argument
Yeah.
all the way through.
I think the Lego
I
Batman
think-
movie does a good job of conveying it. Friends are family.
Yeah, but like Batman and Batgirl already have. Okay, sorry.
Listen, they're
For the
platonic
sake of the
friendship.
podcast and like keeping the conversation moving, personally speaking, I don't feel strongly enough about blocking the door to the romance, simply because I don't believe we're naturally ever going to get to a point where these characters will want to have a romance with each other. But for the sake of the podcast, I feel like I don't have to put my foot down here. I don't want them to hook up, but like, I don't really care either way.
I don't necessarily want them to hook
So
up either.
if you want to keep the door open, I mean, I'm fine with it. Whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
It's more
I don't
of
think it's gonna happen.
It's a concept that like a lot of people in the fandom have, that romance is evil, or like romance will ruin the dynamic between the characters. I don't think so. I think it can be written very well. I think it's a natural progression of a person. Now, do I necessarily want to? Am I going into this thing with the mentality I'm going to write a
Yes.
romance? No. And I feel like none of us should go into that with this mentality.
Yeah. I think,
But-
I think that it's fair enough to just not close the door on it. Fine.
I think-
I will concede there for the sake of moving on.
Yeah, I think for now I won't contest it any further, but I definitely think you're wasting your time.
I think
because-
you're wasting your time too.
yeah.
I don't think we're going to get to it, but
Yeah,
Let us
that's
move
fine. I won't write the rule that it can't happen.
I will, but it won't matter.
It won't matter 'cause you're
That's
fine.
fine.
Yeah, speaking of which, I have one. Vaughn, can we please bring up that last thing?
What last thing?
That,
The solution?
The solution.
Yeah,
Let's talk about the
studio
solution for a
audience
second.
I was
member
just about to
Oki
get to that.
mentioned.
Okay.
Okay. So, obviously, there's been a lot talked about in this episode. We've talked about gender. We've talked about what we're planning on changing, what we're planning on keeping, how these characters are going to relate, whether we should... Actually, we didn't really get into new characters at all. I feel like that's a pretty quick explanation as to why we can't do new characters, right? Kyle,
Yeah.
do you want to explain
Yeah,
that real
I'll
quick?
talk about that real quick. Part of it is this whole thing when we're redesigning a generation and redesigning a wave. Part of that ties into the thing that like that's a lot of people's interest in watching the show, because remember, we aren't doing Generation 3 in a real
not
sense. We're not
actually
making sets. It's
happening.
not. Yeah, we're not actually making a TV show. That's never actually happening. We are making a show about making G3, and part of that. ties into, and that this is why we, like, some people feel they might feel like we're making change for change's sake. I don't think we ever do that. I think we have very real reasons behind what we do. We feel something needs to be changed necessarily, or we have a better idea. But part of that too is that if we were just like, we're just going to do Bionicle Generation 1 again, that becomes, this podcast is like, hey, you know what worked in G1? That did. That's great. All right, let's move on. You know what also worked? That was great. And like that's all we have. That's a boring show. No one wants to see everyone redesign something, quote unquote, and come out with the same thing that was there beforehand. And so like a lot of people on the internet, they hate change. The internet by proxy hate change. We've seen this. We've been making videos for how long, guys?
Like
Just
wow.
yeah, like
roughly 7 years.
roughly 7 years.
More than 2 days.
Actually,
the internet.
it's coming up next month, I think.
Yeah, actually, I think you're right. Well, the internet has always come across, whenever we want to change anything, you know, there's always a thing against it. When we tried to pitch System Bionicle initially, there was a lot of pushback to that. A lot of people did not like that at all. And this is before we did the contest. And then with the contest, once we actually started doing something, people became more on board with it. So, essentially, if we did all new characters, it felt too. We didn't have the necessary restrictions.
It felt too far away.
Yeah, too far away. Like
point.
we might as well create our own line at that
Story.
point, which is fine.
Right.
I'd like to do that, but I feel like the audience would not be interested. And when it comes to designing, making our own designs and stuff, we wouldn't be redesigning Tahu. We would create a whole new Kanohi and a whole new design, and it just felt too far away
It would
from
also
what
take
the
way
initial
too
if this
long.
was, which is. Right, exactly. Which is this whole thing is about it. This whole show is about, hey, we complain about G2 all the time. Let's put our money where our mouth is. Let's see how hard it is to do a G2.
I like money.
You know, so
Yes.
that's why we're doing
So
this
with
for
that
us.
in
and
mind,
you.
I think it's pretty clear that brand new characters necessarily isn't the best idea.
Now that
going
being
forward.
said, despite what we've said before about how we want to use like names from the past if we have to do new characters, I'm not opposed to new characters in the future. I just want our core cast to be the Toa.
When you redesign something, there has to be things you redesign. You know, it's like if you did Transformers and you didn't have Optimus Prime or Bumblebee, then you'd be like, okay,
why bother?
It's not really
yeah,
Transformers.
like
now,
Megatron,
right?
or people like
Make
that.
Robo
Megatron as well.
I think,
Right.
I think that Hound could personally run a movie on his own.
Sounds cool.
there's a lot of characters in that movie that aren't serviceable. There's a lot of new characters in that movie that's, you know, but like you need to have.
So, with all that said, what is the best way to address all these problems, right? We've been kind of leading the conversation in a direction here where we want to change the gender ratio, but we also want to respect the original source material. We want to have changes, but we don't want to take everyone off. We want to introduce new characters, but we don't want to get rid of the old characters. What is the solution
There's
here?
an epic solution. It's the greatest thing ever. I'm not by overselling. I really
You
like
probably
this.
are.
I really do like this though.
How do we describe this in words?
I don't even know.
So you've seen the movie Thor, right?
No.
No, what's it
No.
for?
Yes.
So for those
It's
of
like
you
when
who
you slam your thumb under
actually
a
haven't.
flab of bone.
You joke, but I'm serious.
What
I haven't
if
either. Why is it like
Okay,
such
alright.
a big deal?
Okay,
What if-
how have you not seen?
Because it's
you of all
inaccurate.
people.
let him finish,
Okay.
reeling this back in. Here you go, Bar.
what if we have our Tahu, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's our main. He's our Toa Fire.
He's
He's an
our
awesome
main.
Tahu.
Right.
Sorry.
What if he wasn't the first Tahu? What if there was another Tahu long ago? What if we have our Liwa, who is a new Liwa, was not the first Liwa? There was another Liwa.
What happened to
Right.
him?
Anything else?
What if the power of the Toa isn't necessarily attributed, or the power of the Toa and the name of the Toa isn't necessarily attributed to the specific character as much as it is the power of the element?
Or
And this yeah,
yeah, kind of like a mantle.
Yeah, that's what I was
like
thinking.
a mantle.
Yeah.
It's funny because Toa Fire.
Tahu isn't just a singular character, he's the element of fire. And this mantle can be attributed to multiple characters over a certain amount of time.
Tahu.
Right.
This dude wields the power of Tahu to
would be
become
pretty
the
cool.
Toa of
Well,
Fire.
essentially,
So let's
yeah.
imagine a scenario here where we're on this island that has been fairly, prosperous for a while now. It's been in peace. there hasn't really been a need for heroes. Something happens, and suddenly we need heroes. And
We build them in a factory.
we build them in a factory, and we call it Hero Factory.
And that's
Generation
even
2.
worse.
This will tie into our religious discussion going forward, but we do have a religion for Bionicle. But let's just say that we need someone who exhibits the qualities of Tahu, the strengths of Tahu, the character of Tahu, and is worthy of wielding the mantle of the Toa of Fire, Tahu.
Be
He
worthy.
is granted the power of Tahu, and he becomes our new Tahu.
Now, we actually never discussed this. Can I throw something out there real quick?
Avar dropping
Just
that concept.
Whew. Wow.
Dropping
That's
it
legit.
like a bomb.
So I
Drop
was
it like it's
in my
hot.
head, and I don't know. We really didn't discuss this necessarily fully, but Tahu itself, it's not just the name and stuff that's passed down. Tahu itself is almost like the spirit of fire in a sense,
The Spirit of Fire.
right?
Yes.
So
It's his
we're
own
going
character,
with the Avatar spirit.
almost like the avatar. Oh, imagine if the avatar
Almost.
was there's
Oh,
6
oh,
individual
okay.
avatars and they're passed down, and you can there's one thing like how Rava, for example, was kind of like the spirit of the avatar. Yeah,
This-
it would be almost like
This
that,
is
kind of like
really-
a mixture of Thor and
really
the the mantle passing down and that thing as well.
So, real quick, I have to interject. A couple of close-to-home examples. In a similar instance, this is a lot like the Protectors from Generation 2, where the title of Protector and the power of the Protectors, the masks, would be passed down through generation to generation. This is that's just a close-to-home example of that. Another one, does anyone here remember a guy by the name of Tokan?
Yes.
The Bionicle...
Yeah, he wrote the Hobbit books.
Wow. I believe his series was Bionicle Rebirth Chronicles. It was essentially a Bionicle anime, in a sense, that was made by
Oh,
a fan.
that, yeah.
Now,
Yes.
in that show, they had human characters, which we're not doing... Don't start, Kai. They had human characters, and the Toa, Liwa, Pohachikopaka, and so on, were avatars. Not actually like Avatar, but they were spirits that floated alongside them. In a highly ironic twist, I voiced the Liwa Avatar in
Nice.
Bionicle Rebirth Chronicle.
Right.
Good time.
So
That is,
that's kind of like what that is.
On a very conceptual basis, yes, it's sort of similar. I'm not necessarily imagining Tahu as being a actual spirit with its own brain walking around next to our new Tahu, giving it advice all the time.
Right.
It's more of a metaphorical spirit. It's
more
not.
a mantle.
It is a spirit,
It's
but
not conscious.
it's not necessarily a conscious, state of being all the time. It's more of a manifestation that takes hold of this person and grants that person the ability to become Tahu. Right. And that power is granted by our elemental gods that we'll get into later on. But the idea here is that these are not our first Toa. It's not our first Tahu. It's not our first Liwa. There have been Toa before in the past, and this Liwa, while our current Liwa, the canon Liwa, is going to be female. Liwa has not always been female. There was a male Liwa, and essentially our new characters. I think one thing that I used to describe it was a show called it's called Digimon, obviously, but there was a season of Digimon where it was Digimon Frontier, and it had this really interesting idea that is sort of similar to what I'm thinking of, and I'm going to link the opening in the chat here for the live studio audience to sort of look at. This is kind of similar to how I envision this sort of thing taking place, where these characters can essentially become the Toa, right? In a sense. Now, we haven't really discussed whether or not they can. I don't think they would be able to just change out of their Toa forms, right? Is that
Nah.
that's
No,
something
no,
that they're not going to do?
They're not gonna
yeah.
do.
Once they become the Toa,
they.
once they become the Toa, they take on the mantle of the Toa. They are now the Toa.
I would say that they possibly could give it up at some point, and that might be the concept we want to carry the Turaga concept over. The Turaga were formerly people who bore the mantle of Tahu, or Leela, or Kapaka, and that kind of thing, and then they gave it up once they reached a certain point for whatever reason.
I like that. I like that a lot. Eljay voice Matau.
Yeah.
Do flashbacks.
I mean, like I feel like either he could voice Matau or he could voice like the essentially the spirit of Leela, because I do think I understand what you guys are saying about conscious.
If I am the overarching spirit of Leela, I will take it.
Because I feel like there might be a cool thing to necessarily, and not that they would be advising him or anything the entire way, but like in the same way that in Avatar they could talk to the previous avatars and or Rava.
Council.
Right, for counsel or anything through like the meditation or whatever, that would be the same concept here, where like the spirit of Tahu, it still exists, and he's very much the same type of personality that was beforehand, and they choose personality types kind of similar to who they are because of and that's how we could have newer characters who have elements of the personalities of the old Toa, because that's what they look for, but not necessarily be the exact same characters.
They're not the exact same character.
Would this be a good time to pitch my contribution to this idea?
I don't really know what your contribution to the idea is.
Who our protagonists would be and take upon the mantle?
Do it.
No. Give me 1 second.
Okay, go ahead.
You can do it in just a moment. But
Gotcha.
essentially, to further explain the idea, it's sort of an amalgamation of different various concepts within both G1 and G2.
That's what I love about it the most.
Yeah, we're kind of keeping the idea that the Toa are tied to the elements from G2. They're tied to the elements. They are basically the elements, and they're almost this other godly beings, right? They're called down at a time of need, but
which was one of the best things about G2, I thought, that whole concept. It was a fresh spin on the Toa.
Right. But it's also sort of retaining the idea from G1, where it's like you have Matoran characters that can evolve into Toa. That is sort of like it's kind of a combination of these two ideas into one. Kai, you kind of defined the
prophecy,
the feeling, the power of it, the prophecy of it very well before. I'm going to quote it that you did when I initially pitched this was, when times are dark and all hope seems lost, those who call upon the spirits of the elements, if they be worthy, shall bear the power of the Toa.
Ooh.
And I feel like that's a very neat quote. It's kind of a combination of different prophesiedal things we've had before. That's kind of what we're feeling right now with this.
I love it.
I was like, I remember like I wrote that on my thing. Like once you pitch the idea, I was like, this is what this kind of prophecy should be. And you came back and you're like, I literally went to get like a meal. And I thought of that almost word for word.
It's like G2 but good.
It's like Kai was sat there like chomping at a burger, and then he just thought of it. He was like,
yeah.
He started smiling.
So what?
Like, he sat like where no one could see like that he's thinking about it. So everyone's like, why is that guy smiling? And he's just like, yes, yes.
Now, we're not going to reveal every single thing we have in the pipeline for this project or this story right now. Partially because we haven't fully figured it all out yet.
Right.
And also because we got more material for future episodes.
And also because we've got a ton of more stuff to talk about. But with this in mind, we've got this lineage of Toa. We've got this idea here. Who are the original Toa? What happened to them?
Yeah, what did
What
happen?
the heck is this canister? And why is that here?
Mystery! Intrigue!
We'll get into that sometime later.
Adventure,
Well,
mystery,
you can't have
I am
romance.
spooked.
You can't have a successor to G1 without its mysteries.
Indeed. So, Eljay, if you want to get into your contribution, sure.
Okay,
Do it.
cool.
Canister has an H on it. Alti says. Anyway, go on.
Yeah, H for hilarious. No, so my contribution was trying to figure out who our protagonist would be, because this does open the avenue to new characters. Now, it had been mentioned earlier that these spirits, these embodiments of the Toa, would be looking for people whose personalities are similar to their own, right? Well, who, traditionally speaking, in Generation 1, do we know to have mimicked the Toa's personalities to some certain degree?
I don't know.
It was
What,
the
Eljay?
It was Java, it was Kongu, it was Huki, and so on and so forth.
Yes.
They would be the most likely candidates to inherit the power of the Toa.
So are you saying Kongo's a girl?
Kongo would have to be a girl, but as long as I am the ever-present voice of the embodiment of air, I will take it.
Jala in wind. Anyway, so it's Jala.
I mean, I feel like more people are okay with Kongo being a girl versus Liwa, so hey.
Yeah, exactly. So that
So you're talking Jala,
I don't know, I kinda
Nuparu,
disagree.
Matoro, Holly, basically the Inika.
Holly and water and earth would need to be discussed a little bit further, because there were always two candidates. There was Nuparu and Onapu for earth, and there was Maku and Holly for water.
Leave Onapu out. I want him to become
Well,
Moriki just for purely selfish reasons. Because that was the original story. No, it was because it was the original thing, like in the stupid Moriki joke. It was Onapu.
You're technically not wrong.
Okay, here's the thing. Initially, what I said beforehand a while ago is that I didn't want us necessarily, if we weren't doing new characters, I wanted us to reuse as many names from the previous canon as possible. I feel like if we use, like, we can repurpose names and everything for what we're doing. But I actually do feel that, like, since we're doing new characters anyways, we might have a bit more freedom to make these characters as, you know, who we are, and like without the baggage of previous canon, if we make them specifically with new names and kind of these newer personalities, and then grant them the power to tell later on.
I feel like all the Inika characters have malleable personalities.
Well, possibly, but I do feel like they do serve a purpose, like, they can serve a purpose as either supporting cast or, like, you know, things to do later on. They're very important characters that I'd like to revisit at some point in time, and I don't feel like having their personalities almost not overridden, but like kind of removing these very important characters that people recognize because they were sets for like 2 years. Jala or Matoro, Matoro is a big thing because there's so much baggage, previous canon baggage that comes with Matoro that.
Right.
I feel like we could do new characters and then not have that apply to them and still have them appear in canon. Because
So you're saying you would rather the Matoran be new characters?
I'd rather the Matoran that we have.
Because this part is not canon. This part that we're talking about, who actually becomes a Toa, this part is still up for debate.
We're still going back and forth.
Well, realistically, I wouldn't make entirely new characters. Realistically, it's going to be either the Chronicler's Company or the Inika crew that becomes the Toa. One group or the other group.
What does it realistically mean? What does that mean?
I don't want to come up with 6 new Bionicle-ish names for our protagonists.
We can,
I want to reuse some names.
We can repurpose them, or we can also like find meaningful names and the Tolkien's like using Tolkien's Bionicle dictionary.
Or use existing names.
We could. But there's, again, like I said, there's a lot of previous canon baggage that comes with that, and I do feel like a lot of these characters.
There's a lot of previous canon baggage with the 6 characters. That shouldn't be.
That's
relevant.
what,
to be fair,
we've ignored that up till this point. I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna make it a big deal.
I'm
now.
saying that like we ignored it because we agree that we do need to have the 6 Toa there in some regard. I'm saying that like we don't need to rope in the additional previous canon characters that have their own distinct personalities that a lot of people know, when we don't need to.
One thing I will say is, if we're taking this from this perspective of, hey, we are Lego, I mean, just from a business perspective, if we're using old names, those are names that have already been approved for use.
That's why I wanted to reuse them as much as possible. The only reason I'm pushing for this now is because I feel like we have more freedom to do stuff. Yeah. Because we're running to this thing again where we're talking about Liwa. Part of the whole restriction that was working with us, but also we kept coming across as people are like, well, I don't want Liwa to be a girl, right? Or I don't want Liwa to have this personality, or I don't want Pohachu to have this personality. And it's like, because it comes with previous baggage. We're doing newer characters. Their personalities are essentially going to become the new Tahu, Galu, so we're just kind of overwriting. We're making the name Jalar meaningless. We're making the name Holly and Matoro meaningless if we do this.
Right. I see that, and it also kind of subverts the whole like solution that it brings in, where it's like instead of changing the character, you're introducing a new character.
We have the same problem because now people are like,
introduce the same problem.
I don't want Matoro to be a girl.
Otherwise, normal Matoran be calling each other as Kobaka, Tahu, Onua, etc.
Yes, once they become the Toa, they will be. Yes.
Interesting.
Like, it's not like people they call Thor. It's not like he's a separate. Like even though the mantle of Thor has been passed down essentially.
Yeah. So there's definitely more to discuss in that front. But as far as the initial sort of concept, I think that one's pretty much solid at this point. did we want to touch upon some of the other lore stuff that we came up with? Because we did come up with more stuff. In
Not
terms of the
yet,
island
because it's
and-
still a work
check
in
the time.
progress.
Yeah,
Alright,
we're
we'll talk
already
about it.
roughly at an hour and a half. We still need to talk
Do we
about
want to
Project
do you want to
Afterman.
show the last thing?
Ooh,
One
oh,
last thing.
so you're talking about Tahu, right?
Yeah, I'm talking about time.
The minifigures.
Okay, we did come up with our final design for our Tahu minifigure.
Right.
We're still working on some of the others. I actually don't have that picture ready. Do you have it?
I have your. Yeah, here, give me 1 second when I find it. But yeah, you kind of explain what your thought process was behind it while I grab it for you.
Okay. As far as our Tahu concept, basically, we had a lot of different concepts that everybody brought to the table as far as what their interpretation of Tahu would be going into our system theme. A lot of great ones. Ragdoll made some awesome concepts. Zeros made some concepts. Umatu, just to name a few. But there are a bunch of them, like a ton of concepts for our minifigures. So I tried to incorporate aspects of all of them together when going into our final design. We went through a ton of iterations for our Tahu here. A ton of different combinations, different armor layering, all kinds of stuff to come up with our final design that I also then threw a bit of my own,
Right. Did you
thing into.
I'd like to take a moment real quick and kind of real quick spotlight the other designs that kind of led to this process. Would that be all right?
Yeah, go for it.
Is that all right?
That'll
So
give me some time.
yeah, okay, cool. So I found that I have the link of yours on standby. I don't know if you add anything new to it, but if you wanted to do that real quick. But initially, so the first initial Tahu concept that we got was from the member Ragdoll on our site, and he did this drawing right here. I'm going to post it in the chat for all of you to see. Here you go. All right, so this was the initial concept that we had for Tahu that was made. And you can, this is one of the things that really made us get on board with the whole, the minifigure and kind of seeing,
as a Toa.
and then with Ragdoll's faces in particular was a really big inspiration for us, because for me, I know I was really trying to
I was
brainstorm,
a little
see where that would go.
skeptical about how the faces would work,
Right.
basically.
All right, and then the other big there's two other big sources of inspiration. Umatu was the next one that came along. He did these Toa paintings, where he did what the minifigure would kind of look like.
Character paintings and region paintings.
Right.
Character interpretations were a really big deal with his.
Right. Mm-hmm. And here, let me copy and paste this link as well. He actually posted something here. I don't know if it's loading for me. Can you guys see what he posted in this
No.
It's
chat?
the same thing.
It's the same thing?
Same thing.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, I wouldn't have posted that again if I knew you'd posted it. My bad. So he did something that really tied in the colors stood out with us, and the tribal paintings, the idea of the tribal markings was
Tribal markings, in particular the region as well as how the character looks in said region.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the last there's two more bits of information inspiration that we took from here. Zeros did some really cool concepts. Zeros is a fellow member here at the TTV channel. He's an employee here. He does some of our art stuff, and he did this interpretation of Tahu right here, and he also did a singular version, which I'm
Standalone character portrait
standalone-
kind of deal. And his are
Yeah.
very stylized, very cartoonish, but he kind of carries forth a lot of the design elements, like with the printing and the markings and the color layering and arrangement.
And the Nuva symbol being prominently featured.
The Nuva
as well.
symbol was one of the biggest things that we took from this as well. Both the simpler design, Umatu had a lot of really inornate tribal patterns, and for a minifigure we had to kind of tone that down and kind of rework that to kind of fit the printing on this small scale. And the final one that we came across, Ragdoll did. He went back and he revisited his Toa concepts, and did mask actual minifigure mask concepts.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of time this week to talk about each one of them. We'll maybe get into that next week, but he's done mask concepts for each Toa. So
Right.
check those out in the interim.
So this is the last concept that he had. It's a kind of a redesign of his older one, but has a little more changes. That's all the inspiration the fans have done to this point. And again, some people have been talking about how much we take from fans' input and that thing. Some people feel like we're ignoring some fan suggestions or anything. We pay so much attention to what people are saying on the polls and the comments. The artwork that you guys do has so much influence on what we as a podcast, we as a group do with this pitch. There's a lot of things to
perspective. That's
right.
what it comes down to.
I
We're
know,
looking
like,
at it from a narrow lens, and sometimes there are things we miss that are very obvious, like Pahatu's name meaning stone, that need to get pointed out to us.
Right.
They also
and that
listen,
changed everything. That changed, like, that was an
They
input from
also
a fan
listen,
that changed
right.
the outcome of what we were doing. And I feel like there's a lot of pushback from people who think they're like people want things to remain the same. I feel, and that is something we kind of addressed beforehand. But
Post
you
this
guys,
final art.
your art, you mean a lot to us, and they
Yeah.
alright, so this is the trail.
This
that led
is
us to today.
our final design that we came up with for our Tahu minifigure. This is basically our canon design that we're going to be sticking with. And that is basically what our minifigure is going to go looking like in the future. I will also post our iterations just to show you just a couple of the iterations how we came to this final design. And yeah, it's try to incorporate a lot of aspects from everybody, and just kind of put it in.
The biggest surprise to me is because I wasn't a fan of the blue on Tahu. I wasn't a fan of it on Uniter Tahu. I wasn't really the biggest fan of it on Umatu's Tahu, and yet the inspiration was there, and for some reason I really like how it's arranged here. I don't know what it is.
I love the blue.
The blue makes
it's
it-
not a,
The
It's
darker.
not a. Oh, sorry.
No, go on.
I was gonna say the blue. It works because it looks like an interior color. If you know what I mean. Like, you want the interior, such as the eyes, to stand out. So that works really well, and it gives like a glossy look, which just makes it perfect.
Yeah. I love it. I don't really know what else to say other than I like
The darker highlights, they're dark gray, right?
Yes, they are.
All right, that's all I need to know.
It is.
X is going to be working on our final printable
Yeah.
version, so.
The X is going to be like going over one pass.
I'm
I think
gonna
like
make this thing real.
we did. This is essentially our final design. We are going to like
There might be tweaks in the
There might be some fine tuning.
I do want to see
there
what
will.
I do want to see what the
There
fans
will.
will. Thanks, X. You're the best. I do. I want to see what the fans like think of the concept, and if they have any like additional things that they do. We might see something. We're very visual people. We make videos, so sometimes it takes
Really?
us seeing something to change what we believe about that, or change what we want to see from that. I know, like we've seen it with Umatu's designs beforehand. Specifically, they've changed what we thought about like the color scheme for Lila or like another thing. Well, we need
Almost
to see
convinced us to go Lightning Kopaka.
Almost completely did.
So,
Except for
one
the name.
thing though is that
Here.
there's no accessories or anything on this character, right?
Not yet.
Not yet. No.
Not yet.
Not yet, but we've not. Because
What are you talking about accessories?
I'm talking about things to enhance the figure, like weapons, like
Right.
waist armor, shoulder armor, etc.
No waist
We
or
are-
shoulder armor.
We are not
but
adding
we will-
armor to year one.
No armor, but there will be a weapon.
There will be a weapon.
We're saving the armor because like we have to think about year 2 and year 3, so we're building up to that as a total.
Progression.
They progress, they get more and more powered, they get more and more armor. I posted a little like almost like a vision board, like inspiration board that I made, which is with the concepts from all the different inspirations that led to the final incarnation. So if you guys want to check that out, you can kind of see where we're, all the fans'
that
contributions
picture.
and
I love it.
everything that's led up to this point. But really, Var, you took point with the design. You knocked it out of the park. Loved what you did with the head. The heads they take everything I like about Ragdoll's designs. They kind of like enhance that. So
Totally. So thank you
Oh, thank
very
you.
much for working on it and providing that for this podcast. Now I have the internal turmoil of which to use for the thumbnail, the Tahu Spirit or the Tahu minifigure.
oh, the Tahu Spirit. I didn't know you were
I would
working
use
on that.
Tahu Spirit.
Tahu Spirit, I think is a really good one because you can actually like see the.
Alright.
I think that really kind of takes our concept into a visual thing. It really
Alright.
condenses it all.
In that case,
Yeah.
let us put a close on G3 Talk for the week. We are by no means done. Next week, we will be returning to the foray with another great batch of topics to discuss. But for now, we're going to close with our BIONICLE G3 Talk and move on to the final sequence of the podcast. spotlighting a fan project by the name of Project Afterman. Now, Azani, in particular, is a member of our live studio audience who pledged $50 on Patreon. His support is extraordinary. And what this entitles him to, as per our Patreon perks at patreon.com/the TTV channel, which you guys should all totally check out, is a discussion about his project on the podcast. And what Azani and the Afterman team have done for us, they've provided a really nice Google document that has some nice consolidated documents about Project Afterman, what it is, some artwork about the project, an explanation, etc., which is very helpful for a podcast discussion because we have all the information at our fingertips. And also, there you go, for any of you guys that want to check it out as well. It will be posted in the description below alongside the group's Facebook and Tumblr page. Real quick, what I'm going to do, before we discuss this thing, I'm going to quickly read out the synopsis for Project Afterman. 5 villagers, one from each tribe, are called upon to defend their homeland, but it's more of a burden than an honor. Underqualified for the job, they must nevertheless learn to use their elemental abilities and work together in order to prevent everything they know from falling into darkness. They explore the varied regions of the world, battle monsters, encounter other tribes and factions, piece together their history from fragments of documents and data, and eventually discover the ruins of a once great city. In the Grand Bionicle tradition, they discover that what they were led to believe about their society wasn't true, and it turns their world upside down. Will they still want to complete their quest after its true purpose is revealed? In a world
I'm intrigued.
In a world removed from our own, in space and time, a group of mechanical beings known as the Koke, I think is how you pronounce that, Koki? Azani, clarify. Okay, cool, I was right the first time, the Koke. Live in a relatively peaceful existence on an archipelago of small islands, basing their tribes off the terrain they live in. There are vague hints that another culture existed before the current one in the form of various ruins, but very few villagers know what any of them mean. It's not a complete apocalypse, but it becomes apparent that civilization used to be a lot more advanced. The tribes revere a being known as Tetsujin, Lord of the Machine. Legends say he protected the people of the islands in times of great crisis in the past, and ensures their peace and stability in the present and future. But one day, terrifying beasts unlike anything the islanders had ever seen invaded the islands and ambushed the Koke. The monsters bore the taint of the dark force known only as Kuyami. Suddenly, lands that had been peaceful for centuries were now under attack. The Koke needed defenders.
Hey, okay, so Azani, I got a question. Is Liwa a dude in this one?
Wow.
Liwa doesn't exist.
There is no Liwa.
No Liwa.
It's a hard reboot, dude.
Yeah, he
Yes.
said sure, so I'm good now.
He said no Liwa.
Oh.
He said sure beforehand to something else.
Okay,
he said
well, you
sure, you
lost
can
it.
ask a question.
Hashtag-
Hashtag not my Liwa.
Oh my gosh.
Not by Liwa.
Can we get this trending? Let's do
Let's
this.
do it.
Hashtag not my Liwa.
I actually have a
Sure.
lot of admiration for this concept because it kind of like it bears in mind what I was, what I've always kind of really wanted to see from Bionicle, which is the concept of tribal and robotic.
This is very
aesthetics.
tribal.
Yeah,
It is.
Very
I
tribal
like
stuff.
that. I like it a
Really
lot. It's let's be clear. This is unrelated to the Bionicle. It's not like a Bionicle fan thing per se. It's its own kind of like
Yeah. Per
it's
their
its
a
own
few
franchise.
notes document,
Spiritual successor.
which is
Yeah.
a separate
Spiritual
document.
successor.
They mentioned that the work on Afterman began with the intent of crafting an all-original work of speculative fiction that draws heavily on the atmosphere and character archetypes that make Bionicle the stuff of legend. But it's very
Yeah.
clearly not supposed to be, like a Bionicle reboot kind of thing.
No,
It's
right.
more about the attributes of Bionicle interpreted
Okay,
into
I
a new
see.
project.
we are
which
the
I
ones
really-
ripping off Bionicle. They're doing their original thing. That's
They're
what you
doing
do.
the original
Yeah.
thing.
That's what you got to get along with that. Yeah.
Yes.
That makes a lot of sense. In which instance, the title makes more sense. Afterman.
It does. It makes a lot of sense.
Robots.
Right.
Okay.
They
I
mentioned
like that.
specifically they're focused on creating a story that will appeal to nearly every fan of Generation 1, and while they recognize the enormity and likely impossibility of such a task, they're going to do their best, and they have done their best and will continue to do their best. So I appreciate that.
Let's be fair. When everyone says Generation 1, we're really thinking of 2001 to 2003. And when they want to redo that, when they say we're redoing Generation 1, that's probably about it. So if you,
What are
if
you
like
talking
that-
about? They're obviously talking about Bar Magna.
Oh, boy.
So,
I was actually pleased to recognize some of the names here. Obviously, our Azani's been a fan of ours. He contributed to the Patreon. He's here right now, answering some questions that we have in the chat. However, Phabos is the chief artist. He is a very good artist. He's actually
The art in this is absolutely fantastic.
It's really, really good. The
It's
official art that he's
incredible.
done. Phoebos, I've known of him for a while. We used to be on the same like subforum community. He was part of the original Bionicle fandom back in Gav
Oh, I
Hub.
remember.
Yeah,
Phoebos.
if you remember that.
That's cool.
I don't know if he liked me or not.
Not many people did. Let's be real.
Okay.
Wait to make it all about you, Eljay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like-
okay.
yeah.
Sure, dude.
Listen, I'm just wondering, okay, because I know he was heavily on DeviantArt and he did a lot of work, I believe, with Gobla.
Everybody hates
Anyway.
Eljay.
I mean, sure. I mean,
And that could be a
I mean,
TV
I hate
show.
you too, so.
yeah.
Anyway.
Here after
Thanks,
that, I
best
hate
friend.
you.
We've got right
Thanks,
here in this
not
Google
best
Doc,
friend.
which again is going to be posted in the description for you all to read. We've got a comprehensive list of the characters in the story, as well as the locations of the island of Mahimoko, which is a secluded archipelago made up of 5 islands. So I guess not the island of Mahimoko, the archipelago of Mahimoko.
That's cool. I like that.
And then some information on the
This is
biology
really
and
cool.
customs of the world, and then a big document, like Var mentioned, about some really, really cool looking artwork.
You guys need to make an art book.
Yes,
yeah,
please.
really
I'm
good.
really. I'm like. I
The
love to
format
see all
you've
this
got
stuff.
here, like a lot of it's like sketches and they look awesome. I'm trying to figure out like where to begin. Really, there's a lot of really creative stuff that I'm seeing here in terms of interpretation of like headgear and masks. Like it's clearly branching outside traditional Bionicle norms, which I think is a good idea.
I love just from the names. I can tell they're already like drawing inspiration from Eastern culture, like Asians, Asian, Japanese, and kind of the ancient Chinese mythology. They're kind of pulling that in, as well as the Polynesian themes, as well as the like kind of the stuff that made Bionicle great. So it's kind of like if you combined a tribal Bionicle aesthetic, but instead of like tribal Polynesia or tribal like is it Maori.
Maori.
And you can, instead of that, you kind of drew from like older Japanese folklore.
Yeah.
Love that a lot.
I'm perusing these character bios right now. I like this part. The chiefs of Mahimoko must select one villager from each island that they feel best represents their element to be sent to the Temple of Tetsujin. Their skills will be tested in a game of Dota. Dota. Good old
Anyone look at
Dota
that one
2.
a little bit.
I like the sound of this. I'm
Just
sold.
a smidge.
Mahimoko's traditional sport. Each koke chosen represents one of the 5 virtues a champion needs to succeed: confidence, compassion, curiosity, charisma, and creativity. I like that alliteration there. That's pretty cool. And then we have what I believe are a lot of the main characters and also the chiefs of each of the villages, which we can get into. I won't read every one of them because they're all like massive paragraphs long. But like
A lot
right
of
here,
good world
here's
building,
one.
yeah.
I'll
This is
read
quite an
the first one.
extensive
Give you an
project.
example.
Very
Kai,
extensive.
a young spark in search of a way to burn bright. He is an artist in every shape and form. When he's suddenly wrenched from his humble position as a metal shaper and thrust into a game of Dota, his life is forever changed as he is chosen as the Fire Village's champion and finds the world to be far more dangerous than he could imagine. With his creativity, Kai can find solutions to problems others cannot. So there's
I hate
5
to do
people, 5 koke, and then 5 core virtues that all start with a C. And
There,
each one
there
is
are five main characters. The guy that has to do with fire has the name of Kai.
Ninjago.
Oh, Japanese
It's not a
aesthetic.
criticism. It's not a criticism.
Please
it's an
treat
observation. That
Kai
is all.
with more respect than Ninjago treated Kai.
Yeah, poor
I
Kai.
love all guys
He
right
got
at the world.
shafted.
Yes. All right. Let me see what else.
I really love these character designs. The 5 main characters look
Yeah.
really, really good.
They opted
really
to
do.
go with 5 instead of 6, which
way better.
Wow.
You can use
I
the
love
5
these designs. They're so cool.
The designs are really standing out to me. I've always been a fan of Phoebos' art. He's done good stuff since I've known him, but he's definitely grown as an artist in the last couple of years, really heavily, and it's showing here. The designs are just amazing.
I like this picture. It's like a Glatorian head, but better with tribal markings, and then like a fiery scalp
hair.
that looks really cool to me. It's like fire hair.
I like this.
I really like this picture. This one with the this character
yes.
with the hat.
Yes.
Something to do with the forearm design with like the little like I've had like a little like game or whatever, right? Like
It's
a
you can
toddler's
use it for
game.
mathematics.
Yeah,
Right,
abacus.
yeah.
Abacus.
Abacus.
Abacus on the arms.
Yes.
Toy.
What in the world?
That is such a unique look. That's just I've never seen anything like that before.
Yeah,
it's really cool.
I like that a lot. Like he can make calculations and stuff on his looking at his
That's
forum.
clever.
That's really cool.
And then, yes, we've got the key visual, like the poster that the team's been working on over the last couple days for Afterman right there.
Man.
Azani, shed some
That
light. What is
is-
that? What is that poster supposed to represent?
Well, it's Shredder, obviously.
Shredder, yes, of course. And we'll read it out. They stayed up late on that one. Well, cool. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I
Wow,
got
that
what's going on
is
with this.
man,
This
I'm
is
looking
real
at
cool.
the writing, like the. I'm not sure exactly what that says. It looks
It says
a little bit
Afterman.
like the Torin.
Afterman.
I'm an
That
idiot.
has some
Yeah.
Japanese.
Yes, you are.
I really love the detail. Like if you zoom in, like all the
Font is
scratches and
nice.
wear.
I like the font.
It reminds me of the Takuma Makuta logos. Do you guys remember that? I'm gonna see if I can
I
find
do.
that. The original.
I do. The logos were
yeah.
very cool.
It
I wish they were
reminds
utilized
me-
more.
The A's remind me of Unity, Duty, Destiny. The virtues, the 3 virtues.
Yeah. I really like the E's and the A's are done in that kind of crescent style, like the dot in the middle. And you're right, it's very
It's a unique
UDDS.
font. I don't think I've seen one like that before.
Takuma posted his like ancient calculator, kids toy bar. I'll post that picture in the video.
Well, I mean, like it is. I mean, it's both. You know, it's like
Yeah, it's both.
yeah.
Oh yeah.
All right, Azani says that the what Phuff?
I haven't seen this Faber file before.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah.
The picture.
Yeah, this is they actually. It's cool because like the Makuta and Takuma thing, they fit in negative space with each other.
They overlap. Yeah.
Yeah, but just like the looking at that in general and like comparing it to the Afterman logo and just the remarkable things in the design it has. I love this image a lot. Out of all the images I've seen, this is possibly my favorite one. I like the
According to Azani, the key visual poster there is the main character Kai looking up at Tetsujin. He's a primeval god-type guy, unable to leave the temple in which he dwells.
I can tell he's something powerful.
Ah, so God Emperor from 40K.
He's got like rippling muscles, so he's
Yeah, he
actually
does.
strong.
he's
Abs for days.
he's got an 8-pack. A 9-pack.
He's got a
He's got a
9-pack.
9-pack. Look at that. Yeah. Man.
I don't know what that's supposed to be like coming up from his shoulders and his back.
And
But I really like the look
He
of
just
it.
said
He's bound to the
He's-
temple.
Where's-
He's
So
trapped in the
It's like
center.
strings.
Where's the 9th pack?
it's
got
on the
strings.
very
It's
top.
right in the center, right there.
He's got strings and he's not free.
On the center?
Yeah, and the Lego Batman movie, Var. Come on,
Bar's not buying it.
Batman has a 9-pack.
Azani, answer this. Does he have a 9-pack?
He doesn't. He's got an 8-pack.
He's like, sure.
Man, we gotta show you that movie again.
I love the
I
consistency.
get the joke. That's just not what's going on here. Anyway, continue.
It's really nice seeing consistency within the designs of different things. So I'm looking at the font, and then I look at his shoulder and his shoulder pad, and it's got very similar patterns.
Very
on it.
similar
That is,
patterns,
yeah. That's a really good
that's
attention.
Very
to detail.
cool.
Actually, now I see it. I see these like orbs kind of floating around him, in the
Yeah,
same sense,
yeah.
like that. Yeah. That's actually really cool, Zenyatta
That
style.
is a well thought out drawing. You
I
know,
also
Man.
commend them for the
consistency.
island of... Yeah, I agree completely. The consistency is very important when it comes to stuff like this. But I also really like, from Mahimoka, how they're doing this, like, 5 separate islands kind of a deal that are smaller instead of this one gigantic landmass. It's something fresh, and it shows that they're trying to, like, break out of, like, the Bionicle norms.
Also, the
Which
isolation
is
makes
really-
sense as well. Like, if you're on
Yeah.
an island, it's more difficult to get to another one instead of being on all one landmass. And
Totally.
you know,
5 distinct islands with 5 distinct subcultures and the like. So let
very
me
cool.
let me see right here. When you scroll down, you get into Mahimoko itself. Let me see, because he mentions right here, Ahimoko is the fire island. Covered in volcanoes and lava flows, the fire villagers carve the obsidian they find into weapons and tools. Fire tribesmen are the most skilled at repairing the mechanical bodies of Koke, because they're like forgers and the like. Ahimoko is the home of the fire tribe and is actually 2 volcanic islands which have joined into one. 2 large volcanoes mark the current locations of 2 geologic hotspots, which have left behind the chain of islands which now make up Mahimoko. The region is tropical, but also sports lava rivers where magma has either cooled into long snaking chains of black rock, or more dangerous flows which still burn their way down to the sea. In addition to the 2 main volcanoes, there are several smaller ones, all of which occasionally spew their own brand of fiery death and destruction. Nice. In the center of the island is a depression where lava flows from several volcanoes into a pool, forming a lava lake which fluctuates between cooled black rock and bubbling lava. Heck of a lot of lava on this island. Dangerous place to live. From the sounds of things, this place is a nightmare. Let me see. And then we have Y-Moko, the water island, Makani-Moko, the air island, Lepo-Moko, earth, and How-Moko, ice. How? What about Miru-Moko and Kakama-Moko? No.
Nope.
You're hilarious, Meso.
Wow, you're real funny.
Go for that low-hanging fruit there, why don't you?
I like right here in the first 2 sentences for How-Moko, they mention that there's beautiful auroras that can be seen in the night sky. That strikes to me a different kind of image than what I would normally associate with like the ice area, which I appreciate just for like visual diversity's sake.
That is really cool.
I guess it makes sense. It's like
the Northern
It
Lights,
makes sense. It's
right?
nothing- something-
Northern
it's nothing
Lights.
that's
Yeah,
really been done before, but I like that. That's a fresh take on the matter. Let me see. I'm just continuing
for
to
sure.
peruse these descriptions here. Because I want to...
I got a lot of
What?
robots vibes from these drawings. Like I'm talking about the movie.
Oh,
the
yeah,
animated
the movie
I
Robots.
never saw that movie.
Yeah.
I can kind of see that.
Interesting
I can
film.
I can
I
see
like
it a little bit too. I don't know what else it reminds me of, but it's all resourceful. The designs are all resourceful, like the guy with the hat and the abacuses. Like it's very resourceful and like
The
these
abacusi.
Abacusi. Like you can tell that guy knows like his way around the different islands, or he's like very experienced or resourceful with all of his bits and bobs, like abacusi. And then there was something strapped to his leg, which could have possibly been something also to help with survival. Like,
I like this dude
That's
a lot.
cool looking image, which you just posted, guy.
I really like that dude a lot.
It's like an
Is that
Iron
the same
Man
character
helmet.
from the
No,
the poster?
He's got different. It might be Kai.
It might be a different. Oh,
He doesn't have his hair on
I was
fire.
thinking of the guy bound to the temple.
No, not
You
the
were
Oh,
correct.
Doomfist
Azani
pose.
confirms that is Tetsu's.
Oh, okay.
different-
Never mind. I thought he
Yeah,
had different
different
armor and
concept.
stuff.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess
Well, I
that's
mean-
him cableless.
No, you
He's
can
got
see the
the
cable
little
statue. Now you
muscles.
can see it. You can like from his back. You can kind of see the
I
cables
Yeah.
can see
going
the
down.
9-pack from
They-
here.
they-
And like
Rubbed it out a
his
little
arms are like bolted down. That's why it's or like chained up. That's why I thought.
he's doing the Doomfist pose.
I really like here
He's the
Y-Moko.
Scourge.
They mentioned that the region of Y-Moko is more water than it is land because the islands are surrounded by shallow seas and the islands themselves are covered in water, whether it be by lakes, rivers, swamp, or waterfalls. And they have their settlements built across the place where they have some on land, some rest in the shallows, and they're populated by coral reefs. So it reminded me a lot of like what we're going with Umatu for whatever our water region is going to be called, which gets 2 thumbs up because I love that kind of design.
Oh man,
It's a fresh take on the whole like underwater village or like the kind of water area of like the lily pads from the past. I'm glad people are moving in different directions and exploring what else you can do with water areas. I really like that. I'm looking forward to seeing
really
some
cool.
island concept art as this project continues, like of the different regions and stuff.
Yeah,
I'm really
definitely.
looking forward
If you
to that.
appreciate any part of Bionicle and you want to see like that aesthetic melded with like Eastern influence or Asian influence, this is totally the product for you. This is as someone who loved the 2001, 2003 kind of like atmosphere, and like I'd love to see that just represent anything. That's why I'm excited to play Horizon Zero Dawn. That is like it's something that now like really draws me in.
Definitely. So let me see here. Before we like, because we're like a couple minutes away from hitting the 2-hour mark. Pretty soon here we'll be wrapping up. Before I give like a
This
big
is the longest
in-depth
podcast
like,
in a while.
oh yeah it is.
Yeah.
Any other
haven't eaten yet
comments
today.
on Afterman from any of you here?
Project looks really, really cool. I'm loving everything being put into it right now. This is wow, like very unique idea, very unique designs. I can't wait to see how this progresses because this is very, very promising.
Yeah,
I really love it.
it's
Yeah.
got very strong concepts behind it. There's a lot of thought. You can tell just by looking at the art that it has a lot of inspirations. You've looked at the cultures and you've developed your own kind of culture by using ones that already exist, and that's such a strong way to start, and that is what's got me excited. It's something different. I haven't seen something like this before, so I'm looking forward. I'll keep an eye out.
I definitely think that the suggestion that Bionicle fans would really like this holds true, because it does have a lot of Bionicle vibes. It has a lot of Bionicle feeling to it, but it is certainly, without a shadow of a doubt, its own unique premise and its own unique setting and ideas. And
it
I
feels
love
very
that.
feels very Boneheads and Voodoo Island-ish, except like refined, as though it was an actual good idea.
Yeah,
People
without
working
boneheads.
on that, you know, it's like,
Without voodoo.
without like the bad parts of it. So it's really, really cool. I'm liking this a lot.
Very nice.
It's so distinct, and I personally, I want to see a lot of these colored in. I think the colors are really going to bring this.
Colors are really gonna
bring this out.
He mentions, Azani says, if you have one more thing to talk about Kuyami, so I will grant his wish. Kuyami. Whispers are fleeting when the subject of the Lord of the Shades, Kuyami, is mentioned. Folklore says that he is a god who was once so malevolent in his nature that a ploy to contain him cleaved his very soul in two. Struggling to cling on to life, he rose an army of gruesome monsters known only as the Shades that do their best to keep the Koke living in fear on Mahimoka. So I suppose he, if I had to guess, is the main bad guy.
No, you don't know that, Meso. Just because he's the Lord of Shades doesn't mean, just because he's malevolent, quote
doesn't
unquote,
mean he's the
doesn't
bad
mean
guy.
he's evil.
Maybe he's just misunderstood.
Yeah, maybe he's
trapped in the island in fear.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Maybe that's all just kind of like
a
that's what other people say about him. It's just fake news.
Oh boy.
If he's the Lord of Shades, does he get like a discount on sunglasses?
No, why would he need
Shades and
them?
sunglasses
He's the
are
Lord
two
of
different
Shades.
things.
He just makes them appear.
That's
Oh,
what
that's
it
a
means.
discount.
Yeah, like, are you the Lord of breathing?
The 5-figure discount.
Quite a discount.
Do you have a discount on
that's
breathing
a
now?
significant discount.
All right. Well,
Freeze
now
the
what I'd
best
like to
discount.
say about Afterman before we close this podcast is from the Few Notes document, because they specifically mention, going forward, accordingly, anyone is welcome to join the Afterman team, provided they are willing to follow the parameters of civil group collaboration and that they have attempted to acquaint themselves with the current foundation of the project. At the moment, we are currently open to applications from digital artists and graphic designers. Currently, our base is at a private Discord server. I know something about that. We all do. Discord for life, which we will provide a non-expiring link to upon request. And then they go on to say, it's important to note that the project, while a loosely derived work from TLG's Bionicle franchise, is legally distinct, independent, and non-licensed. It is not a piece of fan fiction, a sequel, or a prequel, and though the name Afterman is taken from one of the suggested titles for Bionicle, it itself is not under copyright or protection of any kind. While there are currently no plans to monetize any aspect of the short stories, art, or sequential art, graphic novel content, created for Project Afterman, such an option is not out of the question. Our eventual goal is to publish a graphic novel, possibly in a serial format. No toys or sets are being considered, nor will they ever be considered.
Well,
to which
not
I
unless
say to the Afterman team, thumbs up. Don't set
Right.
your expectations too high. That's where a lot of fan projects have...
I mean, like,
failed in the past.
if McFarlane Toys comes after it's published with Image and they're like, hey, we can do a license of it. You don't know. Never say never.
Yeah.
Because I never saw I'd be seeing Ruby Toys at Walmart. which I
Azani here
totally
mentions in the sponsor chat, I was around in the M.O.C days,
Okay,
so I tried
buddy.
to be on the safe side with copyright.
There we go.
I
You
applaud
learn.
you.
There we
Great
go.
work.
Okay.
That's
You
100%.
you and the team have clearly thought this through.
That's a very short roller coaster ride of emotions. I was around for the M.O.C days.
You mean
Tried to
the
say
Bionicle
copyright.
like day it was up and then promptly got taken down?
Wow. It was
Yeah.
a great
Listen,
project,
I
but it
think
had some
the project
copyright
itself
and
had
legal issues.
the merit behind the project was solid, but asking
Yep.
for a Kickstarter was just too much. You can't.
It's the
you
kind
can't
of
do
thing
that.
you have
can't
to
mess
think
with
about copyright when you do big,
Yeah,
expansive projects like this.
It's almost like we told them, like I would, pursue them.
If you,
Yeah.
if you
and,
take their
let them know.
game and you try to repackage it in like in a digital thing, and then
Try and sell it.
there's things that they're okay with
completely
Lego. There's
forgot
things
about
that are not okay with Lego. That's one of the things that's
That's
not okay.
one of the ones that's not okay.
Yeah,
So,
no, If anyone was wondering, no, we're not doing Bionicle G3 system sets. We're not doing it.
Well, I mean, like, yeah, we can't. Well, if we design anything, we'd probably make the instructions for you guys and put it up online.
Yep.
You know,
The
or
most
something.
we could probably ever do is like shapeways.
Yeah, we
which
could
people do.
possibly get away with having someone 3D model official, like, or quote unquote official, like condoned by us, or like endorsed by us. Condone's the wrong word. Minifigure masks and stuff, and then like you could possibly sell that on Shapeways. Lego's been very generous of letting Shapeways continue compatible Lego products. They're okay with that. There's a lot of those that pop up, but
I'm glad.
nothing
glad
with the Lego brand.
I'm glad that the Afterman team is not focusing on sets. I think you guys need to forge your own path with art and stories and do exactly what you're doing now. Hone in on the core attributes of what you're working on, and I think you will go far. Don't get bogged down by all that extra stuff that people have in the past, feeling the need and obligation to do certain things, like make it a new Lego theme or whatever. Just don't do it. You guys are doing great work.
Graphic novel is a great way to do that, because this kind of island needs to be seen visually. You know, this kind of concept, you need to see it to really like get the full gravitas of it. So graphic novel is very
to
achievable.
anyone wishing to follow Afterman, or perhaps submit an application to join and help with the Afterman project, all the relevant information will be found in the description below. And I thank you once again, Azani, who I figure, while we're talking about him, might as well be our Patreon spotlight for the week. Azani, thank you very much for pledging to our Patreon. But more than that, thank you very much for continuing to develop these creative projects. And this goes to you and the rest of the Afterman team, who I hope listens to this, because you all are part of the reason why the Bionicle community, even for a project that isn't strictly Bionicle, we can all rally behind stuff that shares its values and the core attributes of it.
Creativity is very
My
important.
hat is off to you, and thank you very much.
Project-afterman.tumblr.com and facebook.com/fantasyafterman, where you can find those links in the description. But just so you guys have
and
that
with that,
in your head.
we have officially passed the 2-hour mark. It's time to end this.
Boy.
Action
I'm
packed
starting to
episode.
get a hunger headache. I'm not even
Likewise,
kidding.
I am going to have an awful time editing this. I apologize if the podcast is late this week. It very well might be. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I've lost an hour of sleep that I'm going to have to now.
A lot of exciting stuff, though.
Yes,
I believe next week we'll probably start talking about more expanded lore stuff.
Yeah,
Next week
finally.
we'll
We
return
got
with
stuff
the
for next week.
overarching plot of our G3 continuation.
TTV will return.
Yeah, TTV will return. We'll see you all next week. Thank you all for listening, and have a great time. I'm Meso.
I'm Barteran.
I'm Eljay.
I'm Jonathan.
I'm Phweffie.
I'm Takuma Nuva.
I'm Tenebrae Invictus.
I'm Apex Trooper.
Legit surprised you're still alive, X. How you doing?
I'm barely holding.
He's been more alive than me.
Holding on.
Farewell, guys.
Why is everything so
See you.
heavy?
Bye-bye.
No copyrighted music.
No Kickstarter for copyrighted music either. We're gonna cut that short right now.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, everyone!